It is 5:30 p.m. on Monday, February 7th, and I'd like to call this work session to order. Up first, we have Ms. Solano with Mayor Office and City Updates.
Good evening, Madam Chair, City Council, and Mayor Gradisar. I have just two brief updates this evening, so this will go very quickly. The first is a COVID update, and just this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I checked the website from the state, and the 1 week cumulative positivity case count for Pueblo County was 499.9, so that has come down quite a bit in the last week. The 1 week positivity rate is 12.1 today, which has come down significantly. And we now have 7 days of stabilized hospitalizations in Pueblo County. I do have hospitalization information for Parkview this evening. This morning, the count of COVID patients were 48, down from 51 this past Friday. Out of the 48, 10 are in ICU, 6 are on a ventilator, and there was 1 death due to COVID today. And I do not have any information from St. Mary Corwin Hospital. And a detailed COVID presentation will be provided by our Health Director, Randy Evitz, and our Pueblo County physician, Dr. Chris Urbina, on the last City Council meeting of the month. I can switch to an ARPA update from there. The mayor met with the internal ARPA team earlier today to review the round 4 recommendations from the community pillar task force groups. There were approximately 11, 12. Well, he'll finalize that list here today or tomorrow that the mayor will recommend to City Council be move forward for funding. That will include a presentation to all of you. It's going to take a couple of evenings and a couple of work sessions. The first, we'll probably split those 4 or 5, and then the following week, the remaining presentations. They will both be in work session format. There'll be about 10-minute presentation and then an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. That'll be Monday, February the 14th, and then the remainder will be on Tuesday, February the 22nd. Monday is a holiday, so we'll move the work session to Tuesday that week. And that will provide then opportunity for all of you to give direction to staff about which ARPA presentations and programs that you will approve for funding. And that will move over then to the law department. So our city attorney can create the ordinances and the subrecipient agreements. So those will be on the city council agenda on either February 28th. And since there's so many, it will likely roll into March as well. And that concludes city updates, unless you, I'm ready for questions, or if you have any direction from what you'd like to me to share next week.
Councilman Flores.
I just had one question. We're going to be reviewing, what'd you say, 12 proposals under ARPA. When that is completed, what is the process going forward to? We're still going to have the money, ARPA money. What do we do? What is the process going forward for opportunities for other people to make our application?
Good question. I'm still in conversation, and we'll receive a direction from all of you and with the mayor moving into 2022. We anticipate that funding will be, we will be receiving it in mid-May. So we have an opportunity to have those discussions and set that direction.
Thank you.
Councilor Wenner, did you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much. Laura, we had discussed at the last work session meeting that I'm pretty sure we had consensus to talk to or have wastewater come and give us a presentation for ARPA funds. If I can check in with council, I think that was a consensus. Yes or no?
I agree with you. It was consensus, and with Nancy's retirement and with Andra coming on board, she needed just a little bit of time for that transition. And your work session calendars are pretty full here, but we'll get her Andra back for a presentation as well.
Okay. Can we have that on the 14th? I think Andrew is pretty competent in putting that together.
Oh, I don't think Andrew's had time in Public Works to communicate with our new interim director in wastewater. So if not the 14th, certainly on the 22nd.
Okay, I would really like to hear that before we do any kind of approval on any more ARPA funds.
Counselor Maestri, Counselor Flores.
Refresh my memory. We had this discussion. It seemed that wastewater, I don't know, it seems to be a limitation using ARPA money for.
No, it's not. No, you can use all of your ARPA money for wastewater, sewer.
Yeah.
You could put 100% toward it. Totally qualifies.
It does totally qualify. My judgment is we don't want to spend all of our ARPA money on wastewater. We have committed $2 million and we're working on that project now. We've got at least 2 other projects that have requested assistance in some of that infrastructure. Wastewater is part of that. But I'm certainly not prepared to recommend to the council that we spend the rest of our ARPA money on wastewater. So I don't know whether that makes any difference to you or not, but we have.
It does. It does. I think the consensus with council is that I think that we had quite a few people on council that did want to do that. I know we have many constituents that want that to happen as well. So remember that council does control the budget, does control all the money, including the ARPA funds.
Right. But and I know you asked the question of Nancy, would she like to have all the ARPA money for wastewater? Yeah. If you ask the Parks Department, you'll hear the same thing. The police department, the fire department, they're all going to say that. We make a judgment based on what is the chief saying? Yeah.
Well, they were all nodding their heads.
We make a judgment about, what's realistic, what's the best use of these funds. You guys are the final determinations of that. And if you've got
Right.
we're going to spend all the money on ARPA, then you can do that. I hope that's because I don't think
We
that's
can.
the use of those funds.
Councilwoman Maestri.
Oh, I think that is the best recommendation. Any infrastructure needs should be priority with the ARPA funds. That is taxpayer money, the ARPA funds. We don't need to affect our infrastructure to continuously deteriorate, and then we have to tax the citizens again for all the improvements. If we have that money and it's available, we should put it towards infrastructure.
Especially with all the growth we're expecting. I agree.
Exactly. If we're going to develop this city, that infrastructure is very important to this city.
Well, if you take a look at your CAFR reports, wastewater has $47 million in the bank.
There's all kinds of infrastructure. We're not just saying wastewater. We're saying infrastructure for the city as a whole. Priority.
So I guess what I'm hearing then is after the new director, Miss Andra, comes on board, we will have her at work session for a wastewater presentation on the possibility and the potential of using ARPA funds.
I just need one piece of direction, Madam Chair. If you want that presentation in addition to the presentations from the recommendations from the pillars next week, I will have to ask a priority of the mayor for both public works and wastewater to make sure that they have the time to get together this week, because they are 2 separate and distinct priority lists. Wastewater has one list and public works has a different one. So we have some internal staff meetings that have to occur before we can arrive at one, I think, priority list to present to the mayor, to present to you. But we can do that. I'm just not certain that they can get it done by the 14th. And if you then, part 2, request then that we postpone the other presentations until after that one, then we can do that as well.
That's what I would like. I would like to hear those needs first before the others. Also, there's no rush on these at all. These ARPA funds have to be approved by 2024. Isn't that correct?
They have to be, yes, they have to be.
So we have time. We don't need to rush into this. I want to hear the needs of the city first.
We'll make arrangements to have wastewater here and they'll outline the capital plans. But I'll guarantee you that the interim director will not be asking that be funded with ARPA funds. So if that's what council wants to do, that's what council can do, but that's not what administration is going to recommend.
Well, no, because he'll probably get fired if they do. So It's up to council to appropriate those, or to make those funds appropriate where it needs to be for infrastructure.
Just in an effort though of time, because we have a packed agenda. I would like to move forward.
We need consensus on this first.
And can we have consensus on moving forward if we are postponing the ARPA presentations before or after the presentations from the 7 pillars?
I'm willing to hear from wastewater, but I also want to hear the ARPA presentations. A lot of people spend a lot of time on getting all this stuff together to come before us. It is important to a lot of people. And although I agree with infrastructure, there's a lot of needs of this city, not just infrastructure. A lot of people were affected by COVID in many different ways, and that's the main priority of this money. So I'm for hearing for wastewater, but also I think it's important that we continue to hear the proposals.
Councilor Martinez Ortega.
I agree with Heather. I don't, it doesn't matter what order they're in, whatever's easiest for everybody. But I think a comprehensive look.
Councilor Flores.
I agree with Councilor Winter that we have plenty of time. So I say we keep the calendar the way it is, see the pillars presentation on the 14th, and we can do the other part on February 22nd or later, since we have plenty of time.
Councilor Maestri.
If that's the case, and we're outnumbered here, I would like to say that we don't vote on the pillar ARPA funds until we have seen all presentations on the needs of the city.
Just to be clear though, I think it's just for work session, so I don't think that there's any voting that happens at work session.
No, but I don't want
Well,
it.
generally what happens is once they're on work session, the following council meeting, we're voting on it. So that's why I wanted to hear about it first. That's why I wanted to hear from Water and Sewer first.
Councilor Winter is correct. After the work session,
Yes.
council has given direction to staff on which to approve or not. And then that starts the presentation and the preparedness for the subrecipient agreements that are then placed as an ordinance on a following council meeting.
Then what I would like to propose, hearing everyone, is perhaps we keep the ARPA presentation on February 14th, schedule a separate work session from wastewater and public works as well to hear what the city needs are after the 7 pillars of ARPA, while not coming to a formal vote on how to spend those monies until after both of those presentations are concluded.
I think we can schedule that all. And ma'am, we also have more than one night of ARPA presentations, as there are about 10 or 12. And it's just, in a work session, it's probably too much to add on the 14th. So we'll split those as well as add wastewater.
Is that okay with everyone?
Just to clarify, we're holding the vote until we're ready. I mean, because like you said, are we able to hold the vote until we have we're talking millions of dollars. We're talking about needs for this city. And we shouldn't be going from like a work session. I mean, we want to take time, have the time to listen to the needs of this city as far as infrastructure goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that just because we hold the work session, we're not going to be held to vote right away. How do we
That's Monday.
that?
At the conclusion of the work session, it's dependent on council's direction on which items, if any, move forward for preparation of a subrecipient agreement and funding.
I think what I just proposed is listening to both 7 pillars community members as well as the city before taking it to a vote.
Okay.
Can I get a thumbs up from everyone? Thumbs up. There. Okay. That's the direction that I think we'll take. Thank you. Okay, we're going to switch gears. Up next, we have the Black Hills presentation by Mr. Behill and Mr. Cordova around 5 and 6. We can have them at the front and whenever you're ready.
Does this monitor work? Yeah, please. Those wipes so I can see.
So it's going to show right here.
Oh, okay.
And make sure that your mic is on. It should have a red button. There you
Got
go.
it. Perfect. Good evening, Madam Chair, President Graham, Mayor Gladys-Starr, and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you this evening to talk about what is known as the retired power plant 5 and 6. I'm here this evening with Gerald Cordova. Gerald is the special projects manager that is assigned to coordinate the work around this project. And today, Gerald, go ahead one. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about, the project history. And I think that's important because many of you are new to council today. Some of you have a longer history with this. And so just kind of as I guess you'd refer to it as a level set, just to give you a little bit of background about how we got to where we are today. And then I'll hand it over to Gerald. He'll spend a little bit of time talking about recent progress and updates associated with 5 and 6. I'd like to share a relevant case study with you tonight, and then something that's happening here in Colorado, and then answer any questions that you have. So I want to just say full disclosure, if you look at this slide, you're probably going to miss a little bit of detail. So the reason this is as busy as it is because for the viewing audience, or, if you have someone who looks at this presentation, if it's posted online, just wanted them to have some context. Might be more helpful just to kind of listen to the history, if you will. So 5 and 6 it was a gas and diesel generators, two gas and diesel generators, and they were converted from a coal system. And back in 2013, it was determined that they were no longer economically efficient. So what that means is they couldn't be dispatched in an economical manner. And so those assets were placed into kind of an economic shutdown, I guess is the term that was used. And then later it was determined that they probably wouldn't come back to economical efficiency. And so it was determined that they should be retired. And that was done in December of 2013 through the PUC. We did then go forward with some community outreach, trying to determine what the best use of that asset would be. We went through a series of meetings that included engaging with council, holding some town hall style meetings. We met with city staff, we met with county staff, and even appeared before council at one point. But what was determined is that we would go forward with decommissioning or demolishing this facility. And so we were going down that path. We filed for the demolition on the 23rd of December in 2014. However, just before we filed that application, the city passed a resolution putting a moratorium on demolition of buildings greater than 15,000 square feet. And so what that really did is that put a stay on the demolition of that building. And we agreed that was okay. I guess I'm maybe paraphrasing a little bit, but we agreed to hold the moratorium until it expired. It was for about 18 months. And during that next year and a half process, year and a half or so, what we did is the city did ask to be able to publish an RFP, a request for proposal, to repurpose that building, and we allowed them to do that. And in addition to that, the PUC offered mediation between the city and Black Hills Energy to try and determine maybe a path forward with this building. The city requested that in February, and we agreed to that as well. However, in 2015, we're talking about May of 2015 right now, the city had gotten their RFP back. There was one RFP response that was received back, and it was deemed insufficient because it didn't have a pro forma with it, and it didn't meet all the qualifications that were posted as part of the RFP. And so as a result, in May, the city in May of 2015, actually withdrew their request for mediation and actually said that they didn't have any issue with us going forward with the decommissioning as proposed, which included demolition of the building. So with the moratorium expiring in June of 2015, we started to move forward with that application for the decommissioning. We had to file an amended application with the PUC, and we started going forward with getting the demolition permits, started to doing some abatement to get the building remediated to an industrial standard so that we could go forward with the decommissioning itself. However, before we were able to get that permit for the demolition, there was an application that was received by the Historic Preservation Commission that wanted to landmark this building. And so after it was heard in Planning and Zoning and by the Historic Preservation Commission in April of 2016, the recommendation was brought forward to council to designate this as a historic landmark. And so that really started a standoff, because I can tell you that Black Hills Energy didn't like that it was being considered for a historic landmark. We threatened legal action that we may end up in district court if it was landmarked as a historic building. And so for 2 years, really, we were in a standoff. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gerald now so he can talk about some of the more recent progress that we've made.
So before we get into some of the details, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of.
Can you make sure that your mic's on?
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Before we get too deep into the details, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of what the facility or the campus looks like. Many of you may have driven past it, but you really don't know where things are at. So directly dead center at the 12 o'clock location is the Pueblo 5 and 6 power plant. Directly across from there is the service center that's used by Colorado Electric for operations support for our staff in our field. Directly next to that is our vehicle maintenance shop, where we provide not only maintenance on our vehicles, but also we service a lot of the equipment that we're utilizing out in the field for our customers. And if you go directly across Victoria over to the parking lot that's located there, that parking lot is owned by Black Hills Energy as well, and is currently leased to the city of Pueblo, used by a number of our neighbors for parking of their tenants and also their customers. Coming down to D Street, you'll notice that there's a warehouse there on the corner of D Street, and within that warehouse, we basically have our material storage, and there's also some outdoor material storage. So many of the items or the components that we use to service our customers are very large in scale and don't fit indoors, so they have to be kept outside. Going back across the street is the substation that basically powers or provides distribution power for the downtown area of the city of Pueblo. The reason why this is all important is because if you look at where Pueblo 5 and 6 is located, the project as it was proposed is really looking at the entire campus, and being able to start and work on remediating or working on Pueblo 5 and 6 would create quite an issue with our ability to function and satisfy our customers in this part of the downtown area. What you don't see to the east of us is really, there's a 12-foot brick wall that exists there. And then right next to that is basically the river walk. So it's a very challenging area to get equipment in and out of there. So to be able to really remediate or to start work on Pueblo 5 and 6, it's almost best to start with a clean sheet of paper and having that area as vacant as possible so that those activities get taken on. With regards to our efforts with Riverwalk North Alliance, in 2018, a partnership was started with that particular group of individuals. And there were a number of actions and activities that took place during that time period. Number one is looking at the historical designation. We were able to really try to help them in capitalizing on that historical designation and using that historical landmark designation to help them with tax credits, which is important to them as far as their capital stack for spend is concerned. Those discounted rates would have really been able to help them in achieving what they needed to get done. we wanted to maintain a level of transparency with them that was very important to us from the beginning, because we did not want our customers to take on the burden of any incremental cost of redevelopment of this facility. And so basically anything that was going to be done that was over and above leveling this building was basically going to be the responsibility of the third party to take that on. And along with that, they would have to provide funds in advance prior to the project starting, as well as providing surety that they had bonds available for environmental liabilities that were associated with the proposed project. We were able to get an appraisal complete for the entire campus. We were also able to move forward with getting a phase 1 environmental assessment completed as well for the entire campus. So those were some of the activities there. Unfortunately, we've not reached an agreement with acceptable terms relative to what I've shared with you thus far. And recently we've informed Riverwalk North Alliance that we feel that we've reached an impasse at this stage of the game in our negotiations with them. We've been meeting with them exclusively on this project for the last number of years, and we think it's really time to maybe expand the envelope and look at what are other potential uses for this particular site. And so going forward, some of the activities that we'd like to go forward with are, number one, working with the city's planning and zoning department in leveraging the Brownfield Grant that would really help us in, number one, developing a site plan that's consistent with the master plan for this particular part of the downtown area, so that it's consistent with the needs of the community and also with the adjoining businesses that were there. We want to also expand this to look at more of a phased approach rather than giving up the whole enchilada, as I shared with you. Going after 5 and 6 by itself would be a very cumbersome task for us in terms of us being able to satisfy customers. The third step is really us looking for a new location. So having the support of our facility in the downtown area really impacts us from an efficiency standpoint. You see our trucks and our materials moving in and out of the downtown area. It is a challenge, and we've really outgrown this footprint. So we need to move forward in really identifying where the right location is going to be for us going forward. We'd also like to go forward in leveraging the state's voluntary cleanup program. We've had a lot of success with that in other parts of the state with other projects, and we just really feel like we have some good collaboration with those teams already. Lastly is, we want to make sure that we find a good, solid partner that's going to be there in hopes of getting this area redeveloped for the city. I'm going to turn things over to John, and he'll talk a little bit more about a similar project that was conducted between Excel and the Housing Authority in the city of Denver.
Thanks, Gerald. So as he alluded to, this is a project that's being done in Denver right now. It's the Denver Housing Authority and Excel Energy. And I thought it was relevant because, first of all, this started back with the Hickenlooper administration. So it's been several years ago. These projects can be slow. Also because it's got all of the elements in what makes a brownfield redevelopment project successful. Next page, please. Thank you. So this is a picture of the Zuni tank farm you see outlined in blue there, and then the rest of that is really Excel's operational footprint in the I think it's called the Sun Valley neighborhood. Next slide, please. If you look at this picture, above the Y and to the right is a little dot there that shows where Excel Energy is in position with the rest of this neighborhood. So in this neighborhood, 80% of the residents here are living in poverty. There are 333 income qualified units that have been identified as obsolete housing. And the opportunity here was for Denver Housing to replace those houses with 800 mixed income units in 4 different phases. And here is part of what made this transaction work for Excel Energy. From the start, the Denver Housing Authority proposed to buy the land at market value. And that's important because, as you see in the note, the certified appraisal was submitted as a confidential part of the proceeding through the PUC. In other words, the PUC's job is to make sure that customers are not harmed. And so this was evidence that they were getting market rate for the land that they were selling. And what made it work for Denver Housing Authority? Well, pretty simply, a lot of federal money. They received a $30 million HUD Choice Neighborhoods Program grant to help redevelop this larger project. And you see the $500,000 that they got from the EPA Brownfields program. I just want to note that EPA Brownfields program is a very similar program to what the city has received from some funds from already. And it's been identified as something we could use in our project. In our discussion with your planning staff and the Brownfield development consultant that is part of that grant, that is the maximum number that a project can receive under that EPA Brownfields program is $500,000 for remediation. And it has to be a third party with clean hands. In other words, they've never owned the property. And so this just is a summary of the benefits of this transaction. And I'll stress they're working on it right now. This is a large project. It's been going on for some time and it's going to continue for many years. They haven't completely cleared all of the hurdles. But as I said, there's a net gain on the sale of the asset that was a benefit to Excel's customers. They avoided some additional decommissioning costs, which was also a benefit to Excel's customers. And then the federal dollars ended up, there was no burden to Excel's customers or really to the local taxpayer from a local taxpaying, perspective. Again, these grants are out there and it's an opportunity to leverage federal dollars to improve your community. And then there's, of course, the environmental justice, right? This was a soiled site that's going to be cleaned and remediated, and there's going to be, open space. And in addition to that, there's going to be all this additional housing. And then finally, that the societal benefit, it was really interesting. So you might remember I said that the 300 plus units are income qualified. So the new development is mixed with income qualified and market rate. And that's important because one of the things Denver's doing right now is trying to make sure that they don't concentrate their income qualified folks. So they actually complement it with some market rate housing around. And so in summary, I can just say that, we think that there has been some really good work done to this point around 5 and 6 in trying to keep this building as part of the city skyline. We've worked pretty diligently with Riverwalk North Alliance and to negotiate some acceptable terms to no avail at this point in time. And so what we're hoping is that by working with the city under their Brownfield Redevelopment Grant, that we might be able to do some master planning to see what the city might reimagine in the footprint of their downtown area. And that we'll commit to developing a phased approach to see if we can make it more attractive for a developer who maybe doesn't have the capital to put it all in at one time. And finally, I just have to end by saying that we remain transparent about the fact that we have to protect the customers, similar to what you saw in that Excel transaction, in order to make evaluate proposals that come forward. And so with that, I'll stop and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions from council? Councilor Maestri.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming in this evening. Can I kind of summarize it to how I'm hearing you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you have your building and you were going to demolish it, and somehow the city or the Historic Preservation Society got involved in that demolishing, correct?
Yeah, that's a simplified version, but yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And met up with the North Riverwalk is who they are, and they're not moving forward with their plan.
Well, their plan is as proposed is that we do the remediation to the standard that they need it for their project. And our position is that we will not pay for anything incremental over the demolition of the project.
How much is the abatement?
I don't have that number.
You don't have, well, wouldn't you have to abate it if you were to demolish it to a certain standard?
We do. And as it was proposed in the 2015 application, I think it was, the number was $5 million for demolition with the net already done.
Okay. So what's the value of the property?
So we did have those appraisals done, but I'm not at liberty to disclose that.
Is the abatement more than the value of the property?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that sounds like a personal problem for you and your stockholders. You're coming here today and you're asking for the city's grant to come up with an idea for you to alleviate yourself from that property because you're planning on moving out of the area because you said due to your traffic and the traffic that brings through the industrial type traffic with your trucks and everything. And so you're asking the city to come and help you to save money for your customers, which is for this community, something new, because I think we've been asking you to save money for customers on a general basis, and that wasn't ever really happening. So now we want to save money for the customers. And I don't know if this, for the city, that we need to be involved in your project. Now, I know that you have said things like, oh, well, you don't want us to just, you wouldn't want us to just fence it off and leave it there and pull out. No, we wouldn't, but I'm sure that there are standards through the PUC that makes you have to do that. So if the abatement is more than the value of your property, how do we, and you want to save your customers, why would we get involved?
So, Counselor, I guess that what I would say in terms of approaching the city is this council heard in December, and not all of you were on council, I understand, but this council heard in December that there were dollars available to help move this project forward. One of the things that's been suggested is that we approach the city about that Brownfield Redevelopment Grant. We have talked with your planning staff, and it's an option, but it's certainly not. It's not a must. We were told to ask, and we are.
And the example here is to put a multifamily housing.
No,
you're giving an example.
Yeah, let me be clear. We have not. It's very premature to imagine what might be the solution here. It's simply I was showing you an example of what did work for a similar project in Colorado.
Yes, because I mean that doesn't work for our river walk. There's no place for the children to play. There's a rail yard behind them and water in front of them. And I'm not sure that the development around our river walk that's what we're asking to put multifamily.
Yeah,
Housing
I
authority.
would tell you just for reference, as an example, when the county was looking at their 1A projects, they did an assessment and they did actually quite a bit of work around that site as well. And one of the proposed alternatives was multi-use ball fields. And some of the council might remember that proposal, and that was seen as the least cost option because it would cap a large part of that with open space. So I'm only saying that there's other options.
Then why don't you get an assessment and bring it? See if we can work something out from there. You guys have the money to do that. Why would you take from our grant? I mean, again, we have a lot of projects here in the city that need to be done that could probably qualify under that grant. Why would we use it to help a corporation rather than to use what we need for in our city? And I know you made a remark to me at a meeting saying, well, it could just not be used and go up and be used in Denver. That's okay. When we're ready to use it, we could reapply and have it accessible and to show that we are responsible, that we just didn't misuse the funds by getting into a situation where we're helping you out. I mean, you're a large corporation. You can always afford that, I would think.
I'm gonna switch over to a different counselor, and then we can revisit. I just want to make sure we have everyone.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood it clearly. Thank you.
Counselor Martinez Ortega. Oh, Counselor Winter.
Yeah, I guess I have some questions. So the $5 million, it's my understanding that that's the cost of the complete demolition.
That's correct.
Right. So, yeah, go ahead.
It was at the time that the application was put forward.
So if you were to take it down tomorrow at what was that, 2016 estimates, it would be $5 million. And you're saying that if it was clear, if the land was clear, it's not worth 5 million.
I would say that's fair.
Okay, so you're not saying that the value of the building, I mean, to make something out of that building is going to be way more than 5 million. I mean, we're looking at like a $30 to $60 million project.
I don't know if you're looking for a response. I couldn't speculate.
I think that's from what I remember, McWilliams was talking about putting half down back in 2016, which was 30 million to go in escrow, and that was half at the time, and then we backed it off to 15. But those funds never produced. The project in Denver, was that land that was already cleared, or did that include a building?
No, those tanks still exist, but they had been remediated to an industrial standard.
Okay. All right. And then you're looking at the $500,000 just for the city to spend, the city to take advantage of that for basically a plan. So you're encouraging the city to make a plan.
Yes, I would say that's a fair way to position that. It really,
that 500,000 wouldn't go for any kind of toxic cleanup. It's just for a plan.
That's correct. This is an assessment grant in which you can either do environmental assessments, or you can there is some funds available for planning, and it's really up to the determination of the city staff. We're just told to ask.
Okay. So your ultimate goal here is to get a plan and then put the building back out for RFP to another developer?
As proposed, what we're trying to do is see if we can do anything to make this project move forward by making it, either easier to take in a phased approach, or if doing some site assessment will help to give more surety to developers so that they can better understand what's available.
Okay, so if you were to demo the property and cap the land so that somebody could build on it, because I've talked to Regional Building about that. So if you were to demo it and abate the land and cap it, would you donate the property to the city?
So I will tell you, I cannot speculate about that, but as proposed in the original application, the customer has to be made whole, which is part of what you saw with Excel. They paid, Denver Housing Authority paid market price for that property.
Well, I just know at one time you had offered the city just to take over all of that property, just to take it over back in 2016.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that. I don't know the history.
Okay. All right. Okay. Somebody else can talk. I'll
Any other
I don't want to hog the whole discussion.
things, Councilor Warner? Councilman Flores?
As you know, I was on city council in 2014 at the time that we were looking at demoing or raising the building. And the council was ready to give you permission to do that. As a result of what happened after that, there was many citizens that wanted to save the building, and we got lots of proposals, lots of ideas. And number one, you've been quite patient in the last, since 2000. When did River, the name of the company, I lose track of it. When did Riverwalk North? When did they begin their process? Because they had some good ideas, and they had some proposals, and they had a couple of experts from Denver, Mrs. I can't remember, Crawford. And so it looked like there was some momentum. But how long have you guys been waiting for this this group to do something to get things started, or at least to give it credibility that it has the potential of succeeding.
Right. So I would tell you that I know that in 2018, that historic preservation, that landmark preservation designation occurred at the encouragement of that partnership. So that was in 2018. So there probably was conversation at that point. And then we entered kind of I would call it an exclusive arrangement of negotiation in 2019 with Riverwalk North.
So, I mean, we're past 4 years here, and has the needle moved at all, other than the historic preservation designation? Has the needle moved at all?
I think the progress that we shared are some of the hurdles, but there has been challenges with negotiating an agreement.
Right. And what is the most current discussion that you've had with them that there's hope that this is going to be concluded? Or
well, as Gerald said, we did inform the Riverwalk North that we're going to end exclusive negotiations. So we're going to try and expand this conversation to see if there are other developers, but we have not ended our conversation with Riverwalk North. If they can repropose their project in a way that fits with the standards that we're looking at, then we're happy to do that.
are you setting deadlines that
We aren't today. No.
not today, but I mean, at some point, you need to make that decision?
It would be speculation for me to give a deadline.
Okay.
I actually have a question. So when you talk about the Brownfield Grant, does the city actually currently have that, Mayor?
We have a Brownfield Grant for $300,000. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, some of that's been used for these phase one environmentals, John, or no?
No, we did that on our own.
Okay. So yes, we qualified for and have received a $300,000 Brownfield Grant. That's used for, as I recall, assessments of properties in the downtown area. We're in the process, I think, of hiring. Maybe we already have hired a consultant to help us do that, identify those properties. So we have a $300,000 Brownfield Grant we got about a year ago.
And that grant then would be used for this project? No.
I don't know whether it could be or not.
Okay. And so what's the 500,000 that you're proposing? That's an additional expense besides the grant?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. I'm just saying that a similar grant is what they got for Excel, but there's a cap on how much they'll allow for remediation. That has been part of the original proposal, was that, a cleanup grant could really defer the cost. And the reality is they're capped at $500,000. That's the only point I was making there. But if I can address specifically the Brownfield Grant that you have today, the mayor's correct. It is $300,000. You have it until 2020, end of this year, I believe. And our project was specifically identified in the application that this.
Well, Councilman Intencio. No, I guess sorry. I guess I'm curious what the other proposals of the grant were for the initial application besides this 5 and 6.
5 and 6, I thought it was for the downtown area, but I could be wrong about that.
No, that helps. Thanks, Mayor. Councilman Intencio.
Well, the $500,000 grant is a new grant altogether. We haven't applied for it. We're not going to yet. As of yet, we can, but that's another grant altogether. It has nothing to do with 300,000.
That's correct.
The building is still under historical designation, correct?
That's correct.
So therefore it can't be demolished.
As of right now, that's correct.
And have you found a new place to move?
We have not.
But you're in the process of looking.
As part of our plan, we need to identify locations.
One day you will move though.
That's the plan.
Yeah. And then my last question is the difference between remediation of the property and capping it are two different things. Capping it means we would put asphalt over the whole thing and leave it as is for eternity. Remediation means digging up any contaminated soil and disposing of it and then making sure that, because we can't build on a capped piece of ground.
I'm actually going to defer. I don't know the technical definition, so I'm just
well, my reference point is the judicial building down there on Elizabeth. Some of it was deemed to be capped, and they made a parking lot out of it so that they wouldn't have to remediate the property. What they did remediate was the portion where the building is, as far as the other piece of the property. So capping it is another thing compared to.
In some cases, capping can be considered a form of remediation, but you're pretty much.
Well, yeah, but I'll give you an example. When they were thinking about the ball fields, they were going to put 6, 8, 10, 12 inches of dirt over everything. And then that was going to be the cap. Everybody has to play on top of the ball, the 12 inches of dirt. There's a ball field, and that's called remediation. That was remediation, but it was also. But we couldn't. There's no way that we would be able to dig a foundation and put a building there without remediation.
That I would agree with.
Yeah.
President Graham.
Thank you for your presentation. And John, how much is your assessment going to cost? The entire 300,000, a portion of it?
So
Do we
we're
have
not
any
asking
idea?
for an assessment. In the planning, it can only be a portion of that grant. I think we've spoken conceptually with your staff and with the Brownfield consultant. I don't think it's going to be more than I'd have to defer to yours.
It would just seem, silly if we didn't have any other proposals come through and we lose this grant and it didn't go to something good. Oh yeah, thank you.
Councilor Maestri.
Your relocation, is it here in Pueblo exclusively, or would it be possibly outside of Pueblo?
No, as part of our franchise, we commit to having a service center here for customers. I would tell you that this is our largest service territory. It makes absolute sense that it would be here. But to guarantee anything today, I just tell you, I would be speculating. But it would make absolute sense that it's here.
So it's a possibility it wouldn't be here. There's that possibility. How far away would it be?
I know that in prior conversations, there was a commitment to staying within the city boundaries.
Let me just,
Mayor.
at one time, Black Hills, maybe they do still own it. The property where the old Lake Drive-In was at I-25 on Pueblo Boulevard, that piece of property there that's just west of Pueblo Boulevard was or owned by Black Hills. And I think that was at one time designed to be the site. Now, apparently things have changed in the interim and that's no longer in play, if I understand it correctly. And council, I think, approved some subdivisions of that property in recent months.
That's correct. In 2017, I believe we purchased that property and that was the desired location. But since operational needs have changed a little bit and we are going to retain a portion of that property for a future substation, but it is no longer seen as a viable candidate for our service center.
Before we move on, it seems like we still probably need to get direction to John and Gerald. Councilor Winter.
I do have one more thing, just a possibility. Those of you that weren't on council at the time, this became a huge political issue because we had council chambers fill up with people that were wanting to save that building. Now, if you look at 2014, when they applied for a demolition, that was what, 8 years ago. It currently is costing the ratepayers $300,000 a year just to maintain what is there right now. They have 24/7 security that constantly is circling that building so that you don't get vagrants or broken windows, that kind of thing. I know there's a pump that runs constantly in that area also because the underground water level is so close to the surface. I think that Black Hills Energy is hesitant to try to get rid of the local. It's a local historical destination. It's not state, it's not national. Even if it was state or national, a owner of a property can always withdraw that for certain circumstances, but I think they probably are hesitant to do that because of the political atmosphere that's around this whole thing. It gets pretty heated. So if you look at just the maintenance of that building from 2014, ratepayers have already paid $2.4 million just in maintenance of that building, which would have been half of the demo of that cost at the time. So maybe what we need to do, and also let me backtrack of what Larry said. I think we need a clarification from regional building and environmental, because it was my understanding from what regional regional had told me at the time, you do have to you do have to abate the land, but you can cap it and you can build on top of it. You can't go lower, mainly because of the water table, but you could say like have a high rise and have that first level as your parking. But we can clarify that. So what I guess what I'm getting at is that maybe we need to put it on the ballot in this November, and ask the public, ask the citizens if we should allow Black Hills to pull that local historic preservation or local historic significance application and move forward with their demolition, so that I mean, if you think about it, by now we could have probably had a beautiful high rise there, probably at market rates, and collecting lots of taxes on it by now. So I don't know, maybe that's what we need to do, is have it on the ballot so that citizens are making that decisions. The majority of the citizens are making that decision. So that Black Hills is out of it and the politicians are out of it, because I think that's why everybody's so hesitant.
Councilor Flores. Councilor Mercer.
Is that Brownfield grant able to use for the Bessemer improvements and everything that's going to go on over there on Northern? I mean, that's a significant project, and I mean, we wouldn't want it to go to waste. Okay.
Yeah, no, it won't go to waste.
Okay. All right. Just wanted clarification.
I wanted to put everything in perspective here. I don't think they're asking us for any action on our part. What they've done here tonight is just gave us an update of what's going on with plans 5 and 6. That's all they're doing here, so that none of us are caught by surprise. And I'm not surprised at all. I mean, you guys have been patient, for quite a number of years to have some developer do something, and it doesn't sound like the needle's moved much. And at some point, your company, which by the way, you guys own this property. I mean, we're talking as though, we can do this and we can do that. You own the property. You'll have to decide, basically what's best for your ratepayers too, as to what the best road is to go down in order to minimize the cost, including demolition. And I think if learn nothing tonight, demolition is back on the table. And what is the process of getting the historical thing undone? Is that a possibility too? Or is that water under the bridge now?
No, I can't speak to any of that. The reason we're here tonight, you're correct, is to update the council on activity. I think specifically what we also shared was our plan on how we could perhaps find another path forward. We started in 2013. We had just come out of the Great Recession. Locally, we did not recover for a number of years. We hear from your staff and from others that there is unprecedented economic activity in the city of Pueblo. And so we believe that it's the right time to see if there are other developers who have an interest in the property. And so we're trying to position this in a way that, we have the best possible opportunity for redevelopment if there is.
So all you're asking is for cooperation. It's more of a cooperation thing with this. They obviously contacted you about the remediation grant, and you meet with planning and zoning in order to make sure that whatever projects decided there, that it's going to fit into our comprehensive plan.
That was the goal.
Okay.
We're fitting with the comprehensive plan, and that knowing the environmental profile from the prior use of the site, that there might be preferred types of development there versus, high rises, whatever.
Thank you for the update.
Just to be clear though, you asked to leverage our grant. So when you ask that we leverage, that you have the opportunity to leverage our grant, you are asking for something. You're asking for our permission to give you access to those grant funds so that you can move forward, right?
My understanding, and I could be wrong, so I would defer to your staff, but my understanding was that that authority was granted to the staff, for the staff to make that decision. I just shared with you that we have approached them and they have said that they would get back to us.
Okay. In an
Sure.
effort of time, I want to make sure that, oh, sorry, Mayor.
Just, yep. Is it fair to say, John, that Black Hills isn't going anywhere anytime soon? And your franchise is up in 2030, correct?
Yes.
But you're not, are you going to actively reach out to a developer now before Black Hills has made its own plans about where it's going to go or where it's going to move to?
Well, I think that's why you saw, it was on the further right end of that spectrum, is because we have to get our own house in order first. We need to better understand how we can exit that either in full or in part, in a phased approach or a complete approach, but we have to understand that environmentally and operationally.
And what I understood Gerald to say was it probably is pretty difficult to tear down the power plant while you guys are still there. You
Yes,
were
sir,
going to do
that's
that
correct.
before though, weren't you, or no?
No,
You weren't.
no. The demolition of the facility would probably be a total different plan as far as raising that site. There were other plans in place, possibly looking at Lake Avenue, et cetera, at that point in time. But again, those plans have changed.
So when you had the plans to demolish the plant before all this historical preservation stuff got put in place, you were going to do that while you were still occupying the rest of the property.
I think that was.
Yeah.
We think so.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you probably could demolish the plant even while you're there. If, for instance, there were a developer that's the piece of property they wanted.
Well,
It would be challenging to work with them.
Yeah.
It would be challenging for us to do that.
Okay.
yeah, there's too many vehicles and there's a working yard that surrounds that plant. So unless they were allocating additional property besides just that building, it would be a construction nightmare to do that. Especially, it'd be a liability for them to be so close to a site like that.
Okay, we're going to move on. John and Gerald, thank you for your presentations. Perhaps we revisit this in December when there's been some time. And since nothing's happening right now.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, our next presentation is from Chief Huber, Mr. Hayes, with some city staff as needed about fire stations, plans, and funding. So Chief Huber, take it away.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council, Mr. Mayor. So we're here tonight to talk to you about why we're looking to build new fire stations versus renovating, and what the timeline is, where the fire stations are located, and the justification for that. Just waiting for the PowerPoint. You want to start? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of council, Mr. Mayor. So if we can go to the next slide, Daryl. Oh, I have it. I'm sorry. Here we go. So my part in this is pretty straightforward. I'm just kind of here to talk about the project implementation and how this might go, subject to, again, availability of funds and designs being completed. But right now we're in the process, of course, of requesting those design funds to fund the completion of a design effort for the 3 fire stations. So we have prepared an RFP. We're putting the finishing touches on it, and it says March up here, but it's possible that we might have that ready to go to purchasing even earlier than that. So we're ready to go forward with this design, and it's an important piece of the process. Clearly, in defining what the requirements are and what the construction cost, obviously, will be able to help refine more of the details and answer some of the questions I think that everybody's got about the scope and purpose of the projects. That design effort is about a 9-month process. So by the end of this year, we would have designs completed. And those designs, of course, would not include the structural and architectural designs, everything like that, but it would also have cost estimates and help us sharpen our pencil on what we're going to need for resources for the actual construction projects themselves. The RFP for construction, once we've got those packages, once we got the design packages for the 3 facilities, then it's a relatively short process to put the RFP together and go out. But again, we're estimating maybe a 12 to 15-month construction timeline from the time that a construction award is made. There are 3 projects, right? And so the timeline could vary wildly depending on how those are awarded, whether it's all as one contractor or 3 separate sites, 3 separate bids. The intent is to have, and I'll I'm jumping a little ahead, but the intent is generally speaking to have a standard design that is site adapted to these 3 specific locations. So this new site design, of course, would meet current standards, provide for response times, of course, and also facilitate or house the larger apparatus we have today. So fire stations that have been in use since the 20s and 30s, we've gotten our money's worth out of those, but it's time to upgrade it and provide modern facilities, both for living for the firefighters, for housing the equipment, for training, and for everything that they do to serve the community there. Again, timeline of 12 to 15 months puts us sometime into a completion date of 2024 as we stand here today. So I'll turn it back over to Chief Huber.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, I get it. All right. This one. All right, so I think I skipped one. Okay, there we go. So this is where the current locations for the fire stations are right now. And with that, this is where we cannot reach the city within 4 minutes with our response times with those current houses. If we move the current fire stations, then we can go ahead and cover the east side very well and get to pretty much the whole east side within 4 minutes. But we still have that gap on the west side, which is why we're requesting Station 11s to be built. And then with Station 11s on the west side, the entire city would be covered with a 4-minute response time. Moving versus renovations, it's actually more cost effective to build a house to standards than it is to try to renovate an old house. The 2018 assessment said that basically the stations we're talking about, all the sites are not good enough to do that. We need to configure the stations a lot differently so that we protect the firefighters within the house to keep them from not cross-contaminating when they get back from a call, or that the exhaust doesn't go into the living space. And with that, it's just got to have a new design. And modern fire stations, having a drive-through fire station is much more convenient than safer than having all those stations that we back into right now. And then adding Station 11s with the density and the annexations, it's going to be a requirement for ISO by the time all that construction is completed. So back in 2018, they gave us an estimate of how much it would cost to build a new fire station, and Station 1's there, it shows $5 million. And that was back in 2018 to rebuild it, versus the renovations for Station 8, which would not bring it up to modern standards. It would just fix what was wrong with it, was going to be $3.5 million. So the justification of the cost versus benefit, I feel is pretty clear. This is a cost breakdown of square footage back in 2018. I think 350 is more of the average square foot rate right now, but we all know how much construction costs are fluctuating right now. And if you wanted an explanation as to the cost analysis and the space needs, I thought I would include that for you so you would understand what we're asking for and why. Cancer, the awareness about cancer has become more prevalent with technology and understanding things. One of the biggest things we've learned is that the clothing we wear at fires and the exhaust from the trucks exposes us a lot more to carcinogens. So we're doing a lot of things right now to reduce that. We have new policies in place about deconning on scene, changing your clothes, keeping the cab clean. We've bought extra equipment so that nothing that has carcinogens on it goes into the cab. So we have SCBA washers, we have extractors in multiple stations. We've created personal spaces in every fire station so that people could change with privacy. I'll turn it over to the mayor if he wants to speak.
Let me just make sure everybody understands what we're talking about here. We're talking about building 4 new fire stations. One on the east side. There's a fire station now on East 4th Street that would be moved farther east on East 4th Street, right across the street from basically the county's building out there. Last year, the city purchased 2 lots there. The downtown station, which is at Station 1, it would be closed, and part of it would probably be used for other purposes. We're looking at it for perhaps a radio shop, but that requires extensive repairs if it's going to be continued to be used as a fire station. We're talking about moving that to Santa Fe Avenue, where we're still working with CDOT to try to acquire some of that excess property that they have when they did I-25. On the north side, Belmont, would move that station that's on Bonfort now. A station would be built north of Highway 47 on Jerry Murphy. The city already owns that property, as I understand it. And it would be just north of Jerry Murphy there, right across from University Hills, basically, is where that station would be located. Then on the west side, on West 24th Street, where NeighborWorks is going to do their development, they're going to donate a lot to the city for a fire station there. So that's would be the new station, basically, that would give us the coverage that the chief and the fire department and the consultants that they've talked to feel like we need. Our plan is in 2023, the certificates of purchase for the Municipal Justice Center will be paid off, that we would reissue those or borrow enough money to complete these purchases and just continue making that payment. We pay about $2.3 million a year on that note, on those certificates of purchase. So our anticipation would be that we'd pay that or less, depending on what the interest rates happen between now and then. I think you've probably heard me say I wanted to borrow the money this year for those fire stations while interest rates were low, but we haven't been able to do that yet. But we have a good relationship with Wells Fargo, and we think we'll be able to do that pretty seamlessly to build these new stations.
Thank you. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from council? Councilor Maestri.
Hi. So in 2018, you were at about 25 million for everything, correct? Is that what you have there? Or you're adding?
If you add them all up, yes.
Okay. Well, and we're able to take the money from the municipal center and start borrowing on it again, correct? What is that loan amount? What's the access of funds there?
Well, the outstanding balance is, I think, $9 million right now.
Mm-hmm.
Paid off in the next 3 years. 21, 22.
Oh, what I mean is, how much are we allowed out of that?
I think we'll have to negotiate.
Mayor, can you turn your mic on, please?
Sorry. We'll have to negotiate with Wells Fargo, but I assume we'll be able to borrow as much as we need.
Okay.
It's just what assets we pledge.
What was the cost of the municipal center, and how much was that loan?
Ooh, that was before my time. $30 million, is that? I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, Anna, do you know how much we borrowed for the Municipal Justice Center at the beginning?
You're on mute.
Whoops, you're on mute, Anna.
I'm sorry. If you'll give me just a few minutes, I didn't have that number, but I can look it up if you give me just a second, and I can come back to you if you want to move on to another question.
Is there any follow-up funds? Because like $30 million and we're at 24, which cost of construction is just through the roof, right? Do we have additional funds that we'll be seeking for that, or opportunities to get funds if we can't, get a higher loan amount?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously why you'll see on your agenda a $600,000 allocation so that we can start the design of these fire stations. So when we design them, we'll have a better idea of what the cost will be.
I mean, you just completed your budget here 2 months ago. Can I ask why these funds weren't in the budget?
The designs for the
Correct.
It was an oversight, I think.
Okay, because we've been a long time in planning. Was it 2018? And so where are those funds coming from?
They're coming from the reserves.
So that's our savings account?
Yep, it's coming from the $41 million in reserves we have.
Okay.
At the end of 2021. That's where we're going to take the 600,000.
That's where we're going to take it from, is from the savings account?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of planning goes into place for these, and it's kind of a budget oversight is and then we have to go to the savings account. We just don't know what's in front of us in the future. It's always nice to have money in your savings account and keep it
We
there.
got plenty of it in the savings account. Yeah.
Well, I think we've always been told that our budget's 108 million this year. I think we're supposed to have like 3 times the amount in the bank as a backup plan, just for savings.
How much?
I mean, that's how we're taught in just good old household economy. You always have 3 times the amount in your savings than what it costs you every month,
Oh, for a month.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we have that.
Well,
I thought you meant 3 times the amount we spend in a year.
Well, it'd be the same thing. It all adds up at the end. But
No.
anyways, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Atencio.
Yeah, my recollection is the Justice Center was between 25 and $30 million. And we should have enough equity in that thing, and we shouldn't have any problem borrowing enough money to build all 4.
No, we pledged lots of assets for that.
Yeah.
So Wells Fargo is satisfied. I think we have more assets now than we had then. So,
absolutely.
we might have to pledge more assets than we did before, depending on what the number is. But
yeah,
the debt load of the city of Pueblo is minuscule compared to other governmental entities in this area.
Yeah, and it'll still be minuscule even if we do this. Yeah, it's a good idea because those fire stations that we have out there are a mess. They are totally unusable. We need new stations and we need them quick.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Graham.
Yeah, I would just second Larry in saying that. I toured them last week, and the men and women that have to live there and work out of there, and that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah.
And we have the
agree.
money, so let's get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Flores.
I just have one quick question. Is any of this money going to be utilized to solve the restroom and dressing room areas where we have, co-ed, female firefighters and male firefighters?
No, that's a good question. We're definitely gonna be setting it up so that everybody has privacy,
Yeah.
and so that that there'll be multiple bathrooms for everybody to be able to use them at the same time.
In the new stations, obviously that's going to be, but what about the existing stations?
So privacy's been set up in every fire station,
Okay.
and just about every station except for the 2 that were slotted to be rebuilt. They only have 1 bathroom.
Okay, thank you.
Chief Huber, for a 4-minute response time, is that a best practice? That's like the target number?
Can you say that question again? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the 4-minute response time, like that's the target number?
Yes, that's NFPA 1710. That's the standard they shoot for.
And I know that you guys have such a fast response time right now. What are you all at right now?
So if you're going off of our accreditation numbers, it probably, I'd have to look. But our average is about 3.5, but we generally hit about 6.5. If you're going at the 90th, which is like 90 out of 100, that's 90th worst. So we kind of set the bar high.
Well, that's brilliant. Every time that I call, I know that you guys are the first ones to show up. So thank you for that. And you show up to 100% of the calls. So
That's right.
Councilman Flores.
I just had a comment. Most people don't know this in the city, but we have one of the highest fire protection classes, which really saves the citizens a lot of money. Their fire insurance is cheaper because we have one of the highest fire protection classes. And if we don't start responding to certain standards, we could lose the fire protection class, or it'll be lowered, or it'll increase, I should say, to a 3 or 4. And everybody in the city would suffer from that because our fire rates would go up. So we're very, very fortunate that we're still within the protection class 2. Not many cities in Colorado have that. And we need to concentrate on making sure that that is never changed because we don't have the right response time or the right water pressure and all the other things that go into fire rating.
That's very
So I wanted
accurate.
to make
Thank you.
that comment for the record.
The land that we purchased recently that had title issues, did that all get cleared up? And was that being able to, I know that we purchased land for the fire station. Did all the title get cleared up so that we have that free and clear?
I'm gonna defer to Mr. Kagosik on that. There's one of the lots that there was a question about the title. We took title by way of a quitclaim deed. I don't think we've done anything, and I don't know whether the title company has determined that that deed of trust that they claimed as a lien had expired by its own terms. Dan, do you have any additional information?
Yeah, I have been talking to Land Title Guarantee about purchasing a minimum policy for $50,000. That would be assurance that the city has clean title to the property. I am going to go, I think, to Stewart Title and ask if they'll do the same thing. The two deeds of trust expired by their own terms. And so the city owns the property free and clear. But just to close the file, the mayor has asked me to purchase a minimum amount of title insurance, insuring the property with no exceptions. I was in contact with the attorney for the holders of the two deed of trust. He agrees with me that those deeds have expired because of the state statute. The statute says you must foreclose within 15 years of the last payment. And that was not done. So those deeds of trust are null and void. And I'm going to proceed to get a minimum amount of title insurance for future purposes, probably to list that property as part of the collateral for the entity listed, listing the certificates of participation.
Could there be anything there that would cause a delay in the construction, or you're going to get that cleared up beforehand?
I think it is cleared up. Land Title listed those as exceptions to our title insurance policy. They came to me later and said we shouldn't have done that. We'll issue you a minimum amount, $50,000 title insurance policy that you can show the people listing the COPs. I guess Land Title is very busy. Most of them are, but I've worked and I think
Okay.
So we'll get that done. Construction.
Well, yeah, actually, because it's the lender that will have the issue collateral to put the property on. So just want to make sure that we move forward. $600,000 on paper for paper is a lot. So just want to make sure that we're going to have the backing and the planning to move forward financially on these fire stations. Because yeah, we do need them, especially with the future development here, residential development. We're desperate. So
Counselor Winter.
thank you.
Oh, Anna has answers for us here. I can see her kind of trying to get our attention.
So when the certificate of participation for the police building was issued in 2008, it was for $20.6 million.
20.6?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. We're good then to put it back on first reading, I think. Everyone has a thumbs up. Counselor Winter has a thumbs up.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everybody who visited also. I appreciate it.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is a police department community service officers update. Do we have Chief Knoller?
Good evening, Madam Work Session Chair, members of council, and Mr. Mayor. This is a presentation to talk about our Community Services Officer program that we'd like to get started at the Pueblo Police Department. If we could put the PowerPoint. Thank you, Daryl. So essentially what's happened is one of the issues we're faced with is a manpower shortage at the Pueblo Police Department, and hiring and retention of police officers right now is a problem across the country. So one day I was walking around the police department talking to officers about what was going on. And one of my officers brought up this program that Colorado Springs Police Department and several other departments in the state have, where they use non-sworn personnel to respond to lower priority calls that don't require a sworn peace officer to carry out duties. So what we did was we did an analysis of those types of calls, and they're listed up there. But for the sake of those who can't see the PowerPoint, abandoned vehicles, burglaries, that would be without a suspect on scene, evidence collection. An example of what type of evidence collection we're talking about is sometimes we'll go to a robbery call, and the store clerk can't burn the video of the incident. So they'll have to call back another day and have an officer respond back out to pick up that evidence. A civilian person could respond and catalog chain of custody and properly tag that item as well. Follow up on cases that don't involve an arrest, frauds, ID thefts, lost or found property, motor vehicle thefts, obviously where the vehicle or the suspect are not on scene. Some parking complaints, property damage, recovered motor vehicles, theft from auto, which is when somebody breaks into your car and steals stuff, and then like traffic hazards. From December 26, 2020 to December 26th of 2021, our sworn members spent about 19,593 man hours on those types of calls, which is the equivalent of 9 full-time employees. And it's actually a little bit more than 9 full-time employees. So in doing an analysis of these calls, we found that about 82% of them occur between 8 in the morning and 10 at night. So the idea of bringing in non-sworn members to handle these types of calls would substantially free up our sworn members to respond more quickly to more violent calls, calls that require a quicker response and do require a sworn member to make an arrest or something of that nature. We talked about it briefly, but there's some more examples of types of calls that the civilians could take. And it's important to note, and this is where some of these calls may sound like you'd want a sworn member to handle. A burglary of a home, for example, if there was somebody still inside the residence, we would send a sworn member to secure that residence and make sure it was safe. But sometimes people will come home, be in their house for a while, and then realize that it got broken into. And those are the kind of burglary calls we would send the sworn or the non-sworn members to. So we call those cold calls. Kind of the way the hiring and training would work. Right now, where we're at, if this was approved by council, we would be in a mid-July hiring point. It would be about mid-July before we could hire. There's a couple of reasons for that. We've got multiple police academies going on, and we don't have the manpower to add their training on top of 2 police academies at the same time. So we'd have to wait for one of those academies to graduate to free up instructors and give us the manpower and the resources we would need to properly train them. They would attend about 5 weeks of training in an academy setting, where we would teach them things like report writing, evidence collection and handling, driving, some defensive tactics, and just generalized stuff like that. After that, they would go into the field for about 4 weeks with the patrolman, when they would teach them how to handle these calls. The idea being, as this program gains momentum, the non-sworn members would train the newer non-sworn members if this program grows, or we have an instance where we needed to replace somebody through promotion or whatever. So that's how that would work. They would be non-exempt general services positions, and they would be included in the Page Union. We have had conversations with the Page Union, and they what's the word I'm looking for? They like the idea. They didn't have any opposition to the idea. There are some initial startup costs as relates to equipment. Under the Page contract, we would have to purchase their uniforms and other equipment. And we're looking at about a total cost for 4 community services officers for just the equipment of just under $15,000. That would include some of the testing that we would have to do. They would be required to undertake polygraph and psychological testing. We would do a background check. We would buy them various pieces of uniform and equipment for them to use on the job. Right now, the salary for these officers in fiscal year 2022 would total roughly $185,164. Those costs include the starting salary of $45,260, the retirement, health insurance, dental, life insurance, Medicare, and the ancillary costs like the uniforms and whatnot. So we're looking for 4 positions for the year, about $312,278. So the primary benefit of this program would allow us to free up our patrol officers from handling calls that they don't necessarily have to be there for. So we can increase community-oriented policing. We can lower our response times. We can start doing a lot of the things that we historically were doing with a larger number of patrol officers that it's become somewhat more difficult to do with the number of officers we have now. The idea that we're pushing inside the organization is community-oriented policing, getting out and knowing the community. And this would allow our officers more time to do those kind of things. So that's my report. I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions, Councilor Martinez Ortega?
Hi, Chief. Can you explain follow-up? As that takes a lot of the time here.
Follow-up is a type of call, and there's some forms of follow-up that would probably still likely require a sworn member. But in general, it's things like going back out and collecting a piece of evidence, responding back out. Maybe you had a burglary. A day later, the person realizes something else was stolen, so we respond out there, either get pictures, serial numbers, things like that. If we have a assault, and then the person ends up in the hospital days later, we'll oftentimes respond out to the hospital to gain additional information from the victim. There's a number of things that would qualify as follow-up. It's basically responding on the same call at a different time. So there's a variety of things that would be in that, some of which would still require a sworn member to respond, and most of which would not.
I got you. Would these CSOs, would they be required to wear body cameras as everyone else?
That's the plan. Yes, sir. Okay. Part of the process would include a body-worn camera for those members.
Okay, I have just 2 quick questions. How will Pueblo be made aware of these CSO officers and the difference in their responsibilities?
We're going to do a big, if it's approved, we would do a big media push. It's also important that we do that because their uniforms are going to be different. We don't want people confusing them with police officers for a number of reasons. We would have to show the vehicles that they're going to use, what they look like, because they will look different than our patrol cars. And also, like you said, it's important for us to be able to tell people what their duties will be and when they would see them and when they might not. And
what kind of service weapons would they carry? Like, I know that a gun isn't a requirement for this position, but what about taser, mace, anything like that?
No, they might have pepper spray, but the plan right now is not to arm them with a taser. There's some liability reasons for that, and the idea is not to put them in positions where they would need to use those kind of tools. And if they are in a position to do that, to where that escalates to that, then they should be looking at a way to back out, calling for an officer to respond to help with that, or de-escalating and moving on.
Okay, I do have one last question. The Colorado Springs has their CSO program since 2010. Have you looked into any of their challenges or any of the? Have you looked into that program at all and seen any challenges or successes that we could learn from or emphasize?
Absolutely. In fact, I used to work with their former chief when I was a DEA task force officer. So I talked with Vince and some of his personnel. And in fact, a lot of our training that we're doing is based on what they've done, identifying issues that they've dealt with. And in fact, initially, when we were exploring this process, we had looked at arming them with tasers. And in speaking with Colorado Springs, they brought up a bunch of different reasons why they decided not to go that route, and I happen to agree with them. So absolutely, we've also reached out to. I haven't personally. I did reach out to Colorado Springs because of my connection, but we've reached out to other agencies, and I can't remember which ones those are, but there's some in northern Colorado. I think Boulder PD has a program, and some of my staff have reached out to them as well. So yeah, the idea here is why recreate the wheel when somebody's already done it? So I mean, we certainly want to put the Pueblo spin on it, because what every community needs is slightly different, but we're looking to learn lessons from those other agencies.
Great, thanks, Chief.
Other questions or Councilor Graham?
Chief, do you think you're going to have a hard time finding people to fulfill these jobs since we're having such a hard time to find people to be actual cops? I mean, is this kind of a Band-Aid for our scenario here?
It's a good question, but there's a couple things that give me hope. Number one, it's a promotional opportunity for employees within the city already. There are other positions that could apply for this job as a promotion, which then creates the issue of can we fill those positions? But there is a gap from about 17, 18 years of age to 21, where you can't serve as a police officer if you want to. And I think a lot of kids in high school are interested in law enforcement as a career field. And I think it's possible that we could gain applications from that age group, maybe 18 plus, to do this job. They can decide without jumping in the pool up to their neck whether law enforcement's a career for them. They get a little bit of a taste of it, and it potentially will allow us to have a future recruiting pool as well. It's small; it's only 4, but you know, it's interesting that you asked that. That's one of the things we've talked about. But I think that the two things I think will help us fill it is it's a promotional opportunity, and then that age group where you can't work in law enforcement, but you want to. Some kids don't want to go to college. I know I didn't when I graduated from high school. But I think we have a chance of filling these slots.
Just the public safety is just so.
Right. It's tough.
We're in a bad spot right now. So, I mean, I get it. I get trying to, do what we can to help our other officers out. And that makes sense. I just hope we can find people to fulfill this position.
Well, I guess the good news is it doesn't cost us anything if we don't hire anybody.
Right.
I think we have much more to gain than we do to lose by starting the program. And I'm confident that we can fill those positions.
Would this program also be able to fast track these 4 individuals if they ever wanted to become a police officer?
I don't know if I can answer that question fully. It's my understanding that since we are running them through the polygraph, the psychological, and the background, that there's some potential for that, but I can't speak directly to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Maestri.
Hi, ma'am.
The effects of defunding the police and lack of respect towards law enforcement officers kind of has us here with a minimal officers. We have room for how many more?
Right now, I believe there's 22 vacancies.
22 vacancies. And my understanding is this year, because we have 22 vacancies, that the salaries will be covered because you don't have the lack of officers. But next year, when you're creating your budget, you'll have to increase your budget.
That would be correct.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted everybody to know that once we implement it, we're going to have an increase in the budget next year. How do you, I have some concerns about it. I feel like, I know our officers need the help because we're lacking the other 22 officers. But my concern is, and it's funny because you have the abandoned vehicles as one of the things. And I'll just tell you a personal story. My son is an officer, and he went out to do a report on an abandoned vehicle. and the lady unleashed her 3 pit bulls on him. Had he had not had his weapon, which he utilized the taser, it could have been a fatal. It could have been fatal because they came at him. In fact, he caught him in the air, the one coming for his throat when he turned around. So that's one concern. The other concern is how are the citizens going to feel? Because, you know, when they're violated and the officer shows up at their house, it's kind of a sense of relief and comfort when you have a certified sworn police officer there to assist you in your time of need.
Right.
And then the other thing is, how do you feel that, is there going to be a problem with the evidence collection through the judicial system because they aren't a certified officer? Would that be, you know, I mean, we would hate to collect evidence and judges throw it out because they're not a police officer.
Right. There's actually no statutory requirement that a police officer collects the evidence. In fact, there's a lot of departments that use civilian crime scene investigators. The biggest one is the Los Angeles Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
They have non-sworn personnel that are trained in collection of evidence,
Mm-hmm.
and they process crime scenes. I mean, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I don't know if you'll remember the O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm-hmm.
The head CSI guy was a civilian that testified in that case. And clearly there were issues with that particular case, but that's not typically what happens there. So no, I don't think there will be issues there. In fact, we do have some non-sworn personnel in the building already taking some of those items in and collecting them. The key is that the chain of custody be clear, that it be processed and packaged the way that it's supposed to be so that the court will accept it as evidence. And that would be part of that training. Now, just to be clear, we are not going to have these CSOs responding to and collecting evidence at homicide scenes, at robberies, major assaults, that kind of thing. What we're talking about is more documents, photographs, video, that level, maybe found property, that kind of stuff that they would be processing as a general rule.
What is the usual training for a civilian CSI investigator?
I don't know. But again, you're talking about people that are collecting evidence at homicides. So the level of processing that would need to be done to preserve DNA evidence is at a level we wouldn't have to. So it's not a fair comparison.
Okay.
What I can tell you is that the training that my officers receive in the police academy is 1 or 2 days at best. So, I mean, it's not the level that you're probably thinking of it when somebody says collecting evidence. And I understand that people's perception when you say collecting evidence is like somebody out there collecting DNA and blood evidence and all these more major cases. Our sworn personnel who've been to several hundred hours of advanced training would continue to collect that type of evidence.
When someone shows up to make a report, when an officer shows up to make a report, who follows through with the investigation part of that?
That would be our investigators, our detectives.
Okay.
Generally speaking, there are some cases where a patrolman would do that.
Mm-hmm.
But just to put some perspective, right now, we currently use civilians to take cold reports. They just do it at the station. So people would come into the police department, they'll make a report to a records clerk. We have part-time personnel that work inside the station. These people, these new CSOs would have the ability to respond out and do the same thing for the same types of calls out in the public eye. And it would take away time that our officers wouldn't need to be at.
Okay. Thanks for all the clarifications.
Absolutely.
Councilman Flores.
You know, I just wanted to clarify one thing about defunding the police. I don't think anyone in our city ever took that seriously. In fact, we did the opposite. In the city of Pueblo, Colorado, the citizens voted to add an additional 14 police officers. And I just wanted to clear the record on that because I think we should be proud of that. I don't think any of us ever, took that movement seriously. the lack of 22 officers is just a condition that's happening everywhere. We have another 40 slots within the city that we can't fill, and almost every business in the community has the same issue.
Yes, sir.
So
That's very true. And I and my officers thank council for not getting on that bandwagon.
Sure. Thank you.
Chief, what's the minimum requirements for the job? It's okay.
We do have a job. Maybe Marissa can bail me out. I don't know. But we did create a job description. I did not bring a copy of it with me. I apologize. I've described essentially what those duties would be. Minimum qualifications would probably be a high school diploma or GED. I think it's 8 years of age. Have a clean driving record. I think marijuana last year.
I guess why I'm asking you is I know that you guys have a pretty robust, like a post Boy Scouts. It's a really great opportunity to connect them once they leave their post to this kind of career path and get young people involved.
I think you're speaking of our Explorer post.
Explorer program.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Yep. Councilor Winter.
Yes, thank you. Chief, I think it was in the middle of last year that you and Ed Smith and Roxanne Pinelli had a meeting about issues in the residential folks that live downtown. And I think at that meeting, you had mentioned that you had 102 applicants for police officers, which is far from nobody applying.
Well, yes, that's true. But we've had 4 hiring processes since then. And just to put some perspective, in 1995, when I applied to work at the Pueblo Police Department, over 400 people applied for the job. There was 2 days of testing that took place. 100 officers, 100 applicants is not an insignificant number. But when you look at the ages prior, when we were experiencing 4 and 5 and 300 officers or 300 people applying for the jobs, it's a significant reduction. This last application process that we just had, and in fact, we are still in the selection process for, we had 60 applicants. Only 29 showed up to take the written or the physical agility test. 14 passed the interview and 3 have already withdrawn. So we're down to 11 officers. I still have to do polygraphs, psychologicals, and backgrounds. To be honest with you, historically, if we get between 4 to 6 officers out of that pool, that'd be good.
Out of the 68.
Out of 60, I think it was 60. It might have been 68. It was in the mid 60s, I believe, was the applications.
You had expressed some concern about Civil Service Commission not getting back to you soon enough. So a lot of the people out of that 102 at that time that had applied, a lot of them would already have been employed by the time it came around to even showing up for an interview. They would take a job, say, as a police officer in another city.
I don't remember that conversation, but I mean, I think our relationship with civil service over the last couple years, at least 2-3 years, has changed dramatically. I had a conversation with my training staff who really oversee our portion of the hiring process about 3 to 4 months ago when I started talking about the way we're running our academies now and trying to see how we can cut time. And really, the only place we could cut time is in the scheduling of the psychological and polygraph exams, which we have zero control over because that's through a third-party contractor. The civil service process is probably as streamlined as it's ever going to be, and is probably as streamlined as just about any other hiring process for law enforcement officers. There may be a couple of things we could do differently, and I can't think of what they are off the top of my head, but we have approached civil service a number of times about different ideas, and they've always been very receptive. And they have actually changed quite a few of their procedures to try to help us accelerate that time. The problem with law enforcement hiring is when you have an application process, you have a physical agility test, a written test, and then an interview process. For example, the interview process for the 29 people that took and passed the written test, that was a week-long process to get all those interviews done. And then you add on to that the polygraph, the psychological, the medical examination, and then the background check. And it's just a very lengthy process. So unfortunately, what does happen sometimes is what you described, that somebody through that process has gotten an offer from another place, because normally they apply at multiple locations.
Well, a lot of cities don't have a civil service commission. I've heard this complaint from several people in the past, and maybe Marissa can help us, but answer that question. But Marissa, isn't it a concern for several departments that a lot of applicants have already, and those would probably be your best applicants that are already accepted a job somewhere else by the time the city even gets around to calling them, because they have to take a test with the Civil Service Commission, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some delays that occur in the process, but I agree with the chief that civil service tries their very best to streamline as much as possible. And, you know, it's a double-edged sword, because you have, you know, the need to verify skill sets and backgrounds and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are there's a lot of usefulness in having civil service exams, because you're verifying those skill sets in a really, you know, a quantitative and qualitative way in order to hire the very best person for the job. So in that sense, it's nice to have that civil service piece in place. But I think that, yes, there are certainly applicants that we lose in the process. But I think our real challenge now is just getting people to be interested in local government careers in general. I think that's a larger issue, honestly, than even the civil service piece. But we're continuing to try.
By the time somebody sends in an application, can you give me an estimate, just in general, how long it takes to even take the test? So if I apply for a job that you have posted today, how long will it take me to even complete a civil service test?
You know, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, since I'm not in civil service. Manuel Alcala, our civil service administrator, could probably answer that better than I could. But, you know, if I had to take a general guess just based on what I'm seeing, you know, you post the position, it's posted for, let's say, 15 days. And then those applications are screened, and then people are invited to the test. I mean, it could be a 30 to 60 day period before that person is actually taking the test. And then, of course, interviews follow that. But I don't want to speculate too much. Manuel could probably give you a better answer than I could.
Yeah. Maybe we could have him come in and explain the process to us. But I think we're losing a lot of quality people. I mean, definitely your top candidates are going to be accepting another job somewhere else before 60 days comes up. I know a lot of cities don't have a civil service commission, but if there's some way that they could possibly speed that up for us. I mean, sure, you might have had 400 people applying in the past, but certainly 102 people applying is not a lack of interest. Anyway, let's see, I did have some other questions here. Oh, that 1/4 sales tax is up in 2022. So if that does not pass, we're looking at less money for your employees, for that staff, for that level of staffing, and the police department anyway.
Yes, ma'am, that's true. I don't know if you were asking a question, but
it's just a point. And that's what, about 7 million that comes in?
it varies from year to year. And I don't think it was that, I don't think it's been that high.
Miss Solano.
Roughly 3 million, 4 million a year, I think.
3 or 4 million a year? Okay, all right. Laura, is it possible to have the Civil Service Commission come in and give us a presentation?
Councilor Winter, it is. And as a matter of fact, I think I'm coming into the start of the 4th year on the job. And when I started 4 years ago, the vacancy date to an employee on the job was 200 days, which when I talked with Manuel, we said what we need to find places within that process to shorten that time frame. It's just long. Well, he's formed a council of employees that are actually engaged in this. And over the last year, council has approved I'm going to say 3 or 4 different times and places that shorten the time span from vacancy to hire date. And there is another one that is actually on the draft agenda that just came out today. And this one is shortening the time frame for everything has to have a notice in civil service. A notice for examination from 30 days previously that's been in the old code to 15 days for both promotional and external. And there are certain rules for a promotional when it's available within the city as a promotion before it goes external to open it up externally. And that group has been working diligently. They meet monthly. There's an assigned city assistant attorney that joins them and then they meet with the commission so that there is support from the commission before those changes come in front of city council. And as it happens, there is one coming in the next city council meeting. It will be on first reading on the 14th. So I certainly can ask Manuel if he can in his staff report to give you an update on the vacancy to hire process and a date. Our work session agenda is, when we look at it, is pretty full for a separate work session, unless you'd like that later in March, but he can certainly do an abbreviated one when he provides a staff report.
Yeah, I mean, that's more than 6 months after application, 200 days. So how long is that shortened?
Yeah, I think it's been I'm going to guess here, and I hate, like Marissa, to either step on his thunder or to be totally wrong. I believe it's been shortened by, I'm going to say 60 to 90 days over the time of the process and what they've done. For instance, when a job or promotion is going to be offered both internally and externally, of course, the General Services Union has a strong comments for, is it appropriate to be announced at the same time? Or is it more appropriate to be announced internally before externally? So they've made some agreements, some compromises to those days. Those days, if they can shorten by 30 at a time, makes a big difference. So
I mean, that's still shortening by 30 days is still quite a bit of, I mean, that's still quite a few months. So you're still losing lots of your prime people. So by the time you get down to folks that applied for it, you're down to folks that probably were your not most desirable folks. They've already got a job.
He will have a summary of all the changes that have been made in the last 3 years. We can shorten the time.
The mayor wants to chime in.
Well, a couple of things, just so the record's clear. The amount collected by the 0.2% is what the amount of the police tax is. Collected in 2020 was $3.6 million. The amount collected in 2021 for that tax was $4.6 million. So went up by $1 million in period. And that's
right.
a chance of 1% is what.
But depending on the political climate, like Councillor Maestri mentioned, I mean, if you got a lot of defunders out there, that might not get passed. So it's just a possibility. But what I'd like to focus more on is how long it's taking us to hire people. I think that's our biggest problem.
Well, and the other thing is that the civil service system is set in our city charter. So
I know, but that can also go to vote to eliminate.
Eliminate the civil service system?
Yeah, it could go on the ballot.
Well, who's in favor of that?
Listen, if it takes 200 days to hire, somebody that's not management, Mayor, and that's your number one reason why you're missing out on recruiting people, maybe it needs to go to the ballot. Let's hear what Manuel has to say. Let's hear what changes they've made. If that's our biggest problem, then yeah, maybe we need to put it on the ballot.
Councilor Wenner, I will say we're going to transition. Judge Sykes has been so patiently waiting in the audience this whole time. So I want to bring her forward for the next thing on our agenda. Chief, I'm going to ask you to remain up here as we talk about the municipal offenders in the jail status. Perhaps we'll continue this conversation embedded in this conversation as we're talking about personnel and staffing, but I just wanted to acknowledge her presence and call her to the stage.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council, Mayor, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. So I put together a PowerPoint. Pull that up. So I was asked to come tonight and speak about the Pueblo County Jail and how we utilize the Pueblo County Jail for municipal defendants. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the history and tell you what we're currently doing, but I want to make sure that we're clear on something. So when defendants are taken to the Pueblo County Jail, they can be arrested on state charges as well as municipal charges. So the ones that we're going to be talking about today are ones that only have municipal charges. They do not have state charges. They're not also being arrested on state charges, because those ones that have the dual charges kind of fall into a different category. So just keep that in mind that we're talking about municipal only defendants. So this is sort of a historical background of how things evolved with the Pueblo County Jail. Back in 1983, the city negotiated a contract with the Pueblo County to house our municipal inmates. And that agreement was still in place in 2013. And at that time, the Pueblo County Jail was becoming very overcrowded. And so the sheriff made a couple of changes. Number one, they said they're not going to take any more direct arrests, which means that the police department could not go out and arrest someone for disorderly conduct and take them straight to jail. So they would not take direct arrests on municipal only offenses. They also stopped taking 4-hour holds, and the 4-hour holds were utilized for diffusing situations, people that were intoxicated, things like that. Police department could take them to the Pueblo County Jail. They would sit there, in the cell for up to 4 hours, and then the jail would cut them loose. So they stopped doing that. And then at the end of 2013, they terminated the agreement with the city. And so that started in January. We had no agreement with the city. The county wasn't interested in entering into a new contract at that time. When I took the bench in 2016, shortly after that, toward the end of 2016, the county started restricting how long we could hold people, who they would hold. And at this time, they were only holding people on municipal warrants. So those people that failed to comply with orders or failed to show up, those are the only people that they were holding on municipal only. And so in 2017, as this continued to be restricted, that's when we negotiated the contract with outside counties to house our inmates. Also in 2017, we converted one of our community service vans to be a transport van, a secure transport van, so we could transport people to the outside county jails. And we contracted with a transport facility because we didn't have any way to transport them at the time. So we did all that in the 2017, 2018. January of 2018, the jail refused to hold any municipal inmates for any reason. So the only municipal inmates at that point that were being held by Pueblo County were those who were arrested on those dual charges, state and municipal. And then we sort of worked with the jail. They would take certain exceptions. If there was a case that I contacted them about, that we worked together on that. But what the jail would do is they would call us and say, okay, district courts release this person on their charges if they're being held on municipal only. And we would have 48 hours to transport them out of the Pueblo County Jail. And so that's how we managed it from 2018 to June of 2020, essentially. And of course, COVID happened, and a bunch of people were out of jail because of the risk of COVID. And so their numbers dropped drastically. So in June of 2020, the sheriff came to me and said he could take inmates again. And so we started doing that. We got 10 beds. We sort of negotiated what we've always been doing as far as medical releases and things like that, and open communication. So we kept all that going. But we had 10 beds to use for pre-sentence and sentenced inmates at that point. And again, these aren't direct arrests. These are only people that are being arrested on warrants or sentenced after they've been found guilty or plead guilty. So that's sort of the background. So you guys have an idea of what the background looks like. And then again, the only people that are sent to jail on municipal charges at this point are those people that are sentenced to jail. So people that are found guilty or plead guilty or no contest to charges, or people arrested on municipal warrants. And those are people that fail to comply. Those are by far the largest number of people that I see on my jail advisement docket every day, are people that refuse to show up for court. And when I say that people refuse to show up for court, we're talking they have refused to show up for court 10 times. So the case may be a year and a half old, because what happens is they get a ticket and they have a court date. They fail to show up for that court date, and so they receive a warrant. They get a free bite at the apple, so nothing happens really with that warrant except for court costs. They have police contact, or they come into the court and they need to clear their warrant. They get a bond, or a PR bond, personal recognizance bond, that says, okay, we're releasing you and you're going to promise to appear on this new date. So they sign it, they make a promise to appear, and then they don't show up. And then they have police contact again. The police give them another PR bond with another promise to appear, and they don't show up for that. And then it just keeps going like this until we're a year down the road. So we have a lot of those. Those are by far the largest number of defendants I see. As I said, in 2017, we housed sentenced defendants were housed outside of Pueblo County. The budget for the jail is in the police department, because I believe, no one's ever told me this, I'm just assuming, because originally it was the police that were doing the arrests. They were doing the direct arrests. So it made sense to put the jail monies in the police department budget. And that when that changed, it just never switched over to municipal court. So the police department still has the budget. So all of that tracking goes through the police department, and they do a good job with that. The transportation costs were paid out of the municipal court budget. And so you'll see our transportation costs for those years. I can tell you that the reason they dropped drastically in 2020 and for 2021 is because we hired a marshal. And so now we have a full-time marshal and a part-time marshal. They do our transports for us. So they use our converted van and they take people down to Los Animas if we need to. They transport people over from the Pueblo County Jail to do our pre-trials, or bring defendants over for trial. So they do all our transports. Rarely we would have a situation where we would need somebody else. And typically the police department's been really good about partnering with us. If we need someone to bring over some females, they'll chip in with officers to help us bring those over. So we haven't had to pay that cost for the last year or so. So once the jail decided that they weren't going to take municipal only inmates anymore, or defendants anymore, what we did is we talked with the police department and we said, it makes no sense, because what was happening is the officers were taking this person off the street, taking them to the Pueblo County Jail, where they would have to take time off the street and do the booking process. And then as soon as they were booked in, the Pueblo County Jail would give them a PR bond and put them back out. So that didn't make a lot of sense to us. So what we did is we have put together PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds. The officers carry them with them, so they can look at the person's history and they can look at the circumstances, and they can give those PR bonds in the field. So if you have a person that simply has, one or two failures to appear, and it's on minor level offenses like loitering or trespass, something like that, they can go ahead and give those PR bonds in the field. And I think that's been working for the officers, hopefully. Allows them to be in the field, doesn't have to take so much time off the street. So that's been working. And then those defendants that have the multiple failures to appear, those are arrested and taken to jail. Now, the officers still have the discretion, if you have someone that's creating a disturbance and they feel like they need to diffuse that situation, they can still take the person over to the county jail, and the county jail will book them in. But depending on the circumstances, they may just give them a PR bond from there. But then now you've created time and distance. So hopefully that's going to help diffuse that situation. But most times what the officers will do too is they can bring them directly to court. So they can bring them into the court. If I'm on the bench, then I'll go ahead and see them on their warrants right then. Or if they take them to the county jail, we arraign them. We have advisements Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So they'll hold them overnight, or they'll hold them for a couple of days until they can get on the jail advisement docket too. So I think It's been kind of difficult, but I think one of the things that we have done over the last couple of years is cultivated a real good relationship with the jail and the staff at the jail. So we have open communications with them, and of course, the police department, we always work with well. So here's just on, we have the sentence defendants, and then we have pre-sentence defendants, and pre-sentence defendants are ones that have open charges they haven't pled to yet. And so they're generally advised within 48 hours. There's going to be some bills passed this year, most likely, that's going to require us to advise them within 48 hours. Sundays and holidays aren't included in that, so we usually easily meet that, unless there's a snow day or something like that. And if that happens, what happens if I can't arraign them within that 48 hours, generally I just give them PR bonds. And a new court date, and then we see them again in a few months. So all of our in custody defendants are appointed counsel. That was a legislative change from several years ago, so we've been complying with that. Approximately 6 of the 10 beds are occupied by pre-sentence defendants. And so pre-sentence defendants may only be held for a day or 2 days, so they're kind of rotating in and out. And so we pretty much keep those 10 beds full with either sentenced or pre-sentenced. The average stay for pre-sentence defendants is about 3 days, which is an important statistic because I know one of the overcrowding concerns that the jail had years ago was that defendants were being held so long between the time they were arrested and actually went to trial that it was taking that space away from sentenced defendants. So which is where you hear a lot of this pre-sentence release with in-home detention and day reporting and things like that, that the judicial is doing. So average stay is about 3 days. What I've done, I told you the police department tracks this, so they track everything. And I started in 2018. And this shows you, we started with Douglas County and Park County, where there are outside counties that we worked with. That was the total paid for the jail is at the bottom for 2018. And it breaks it down by how many people we had in custody and their average length of stay. So you'll see if you go over to the right, where it has the Douglas cost and the Park cost in the green columns, those are our sentenced defendants. So for those people, that's why their stays are longer, because they were serving sentences. They weren't pre-sentenced defendants. At this time, the Pueblo County Jail wasn't taking or holding any municipal inmates. And so what we did is they essentially got a booking fee, which was 1 day's worth of holding. So you can see all the people that were booked in on presumably municipal only offenses, and we were charged 1 day for each of those from the Pueblo County Jail. But we weren't charging anything else because they didn't hold them. And so I've given you several years so you can go through it. If you have any questions about any of these, I'm happy to answer that. But this gives you the total number of costs. 2019 was a larger cost. And again, we were at that point, we were using Douglas and Los Animas. If you go to the next one, this is 2020. And again, the number significantly less. That had a lot to do with COVID, because the jails obviously weren't going to hold people with COVID because they were letting people out. So minor level offenses they didn't want to hold, which made sense at the time. You'll see in June of 2020 is when the jail said that we could start utilizing our 10 beds. And so this was, you can see that here where that started again. But remember, the length of time, the average length of time is longer here because at this point we were using Pueblo County not only for pre-sentence, but sentenced defendants. So you'll see the average stay is a little bit longer. We pay all of them about the same. Our out of county or anywhere from $53 to $55 a day. Pueblo County, we were paying $53 a day. When the sheriff came to me in June of 2020, he agreed to accept $45 a day. And so I did the math today and it looks like we paid $53 a day. So I'm not sure on the billings where that came out for 2020. But if you go to the next slide in 2021, one of the things I wanted to let all of you know about, we're still using Los Animas for our sentenced inmates. That's how we maintain our 10 beds at Pueblo County. So what we'll do is if we're getting high on our beds, our bed usage, we'll take some of the sentenced defendants and we'll transport them down to Los Animas to finish their sentence. So that frees up those pre-sentence beds. And so Pueblo County has not sent us or charged us for housing our inmates in 2020. So 2021. So just so you know, that's if that becomes an issue, that's something. And I know Elisa at the police station has been working on getting those invoices. And I think we found out today that the lady that was doing them has retired. And so it's probably just a communication error. So that'll be coming up. But they haven't charged us anything so far for 2021. So you guys can take a look at all that. One of the things that I want to talk about, one of the reasons it was so important to negotiate contracts with outside agencies or outside counties at the time is because having jail is an important tool. You know, when we don't have jail, court efficiency suffers, and we can't resolve a case, people don't show up to court. The other thing that frustrates me a little bit is because we can't intervene in any kind of meaningful way with defendants if we can't get the defendant in front of us. So we can't provide substance abuse, mental health services, any kind of resources that would help those people. And the other thing that is frustrating for me is that when you cannot immediately require them to come before you, it just increases the penalties for the defendant. So now they're having all of these failures to appear, all of these contempt charges. And when they were looking at originally a fine, now they're looking at 90 days jail because they've defiantly refused to show up for court. And so, I mean, if we get those people in early, then we can resolve it with a fine, maybe probation, things like that, resources, rather than, you know, spending our money and having them go to jail. The other issue, of course, is public safety. I think there's something to be said to have immediate consequence, something that is directly tied to the offense. A lot of times by the time I get defendants in front of me, they don't even recall, you know, that they received a ticket on that given day. So I think there's something to be said for immediate consequences, diffusing tensions, and of course for the community, it's avoiding further criminal activity, because a lot of these time, I mean, you know, we'll have people that have multiple charges, haven't showed up for court, and they're still reoffending. Theft from merchant charges are a good example of that. We have a large amount of theft from merchant cases through municipal court, and those people continue to reoffend even when they have warrants pending. So those are some of the concerns, and I think it's an important tool to have. I try to use it sparingly because of all of the issues involved. But going forward, my goal would be to eliminate the need to transport and house defendants outside the county. So ultimately, that would be nice to have everybody here. I'd like to increase the number of beds available for municipal defendants from 10 to 30. I don't know that we would use 30, but that sort of ties in with the next bullet point that I talked to the chief about today, is allowing police officers to make direct arrests again, and make direct arrests for those people that have municipal violations and are habitual offenders. So for instance, if we have a habitual offender for theft from merchant, and just so you know, a habitual offender under ordinance is defined as someone who has been convicted of the same offense twice within the last 5 years. And sometimes I have defendants that have been convicted 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years for theft from merchant and some other offenses. And so if they got called to the store and that person happened to be the person that was going to receive the ticket that day, and they were a habitual offender, the police department would have the ability to take them directly to jail, and the jail would hold them. Now, again, they may only hold them for those 48 hours because I'm going to see them on the jail advisement. I'm going to appoint counsel. I'm going to tell them that they're facing jail time because they're a habitual offender, and then I'm going to set bond. So chances are they may be released again, but again, you have that immediate consequence. And I do think that if people believe or know that they could be arrested directly from the store and taken to jail, that may decrease some of our theft from merchants. And I think the police will know, we've had lots of conversations with the district attorney's office and merchants in town where that is a huge issue. I think the last thing I heard was that Pueblo has one of the largest loss rates in the nation for theft from merchant. So, and then of course, I always want to maintain a strong communication with the sheriff and the jail staff. Despite some of the frustrations, I think they work really hard and do a good job for us. And so that would always be part of my goals, to maintain that. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Chief.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I would just echo my agreement that the ability to make direct arrests in certain cases is something I think would help us address some of the crime problems that we have, especially as it relates to your theft from merchant stuff. You know, I think in fairness to the jail and the sheriff's department and his staff, they have a jail facility that is in dire need of being replaced. It's inadequate to house the number of inmates that we have in the area. And that's part of the reason why things have worked out the way they have, as far as our ability to directly take people to jail. So I'm with the judge here, ready to answer any questions.
It was a huge issue and remained a huge issue until COVID, when the guidelines sort of changed for the jail. Because at that time, it was a safety issue, not only for the deputies within the jail, but also for our defendants, because they were in housing with other more serious offenders. So those are just some considerations, and it is where it is, but I think we're in a good place as far as, everybody's worked together. We've come up with alternative solutions, but I would love as building the new jail to be able to negotiate some new terms so that we can do some different things that I think would be more beneficial.
Okay, thanks, Judge. Thanks. Are there questions from council? Councilman Flores.
Like all measurements, that our current jail is overcrowded. I mean, everybody knows that, but every once in a while you get a study that the current jail just doesn't have the proper amount of room for the amount of inmates that are there. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know what the recent numbers are. I know at the time when they discontinued taking municipal inmates, their numbers, they had beds for maybe 400 or 500 people, and they were housing somewhere, sometime it was over 8. And so the other thing that I guess we missed, because it's so long ago in time now, is that the jail is not overcrowded necessarily because we have so many more people that are breaking the law here in Pueblo. The jail is overcrowded because the state legislature changed some of the sentencing guidelines, and they changed the sentences that are going to be imposed for certain offenses. So anybody that is sentenced to jail for 2 years or less serves it in the county jail. So this helped them reduce the population of the state jails. But what it did is put them back out on the counties, and Pueblo County is not the only county. I mean, counties all across the state were screaming about this at the time. So what it did is it ballooned the population of the county jail. And it ballooned the population with people who have some more serious offenses than what would typically be housed in the county jail. And so it put a stress on staff and on the facility. So make sure you keep that in mind too. I don't think that happened. I want to say it was between 2010 and 2013. I know that a lot of that is what prompted the sheriff's action.
How many inmates there are in our jail that are from Pueblo? Talking about inmates. And I'm assuming, just by statistics, population, the majority of the inmates in our jail are from Pueblo.
Yeah, I don't have those statistics. Anecdotally, I would say most of the defendants that I see are from the city of Pueblo, with mattering of people from outside county.
We had you come for a reason. The county has asked us for a cooperative agreement. Cooperative agreement is really, doesn't have much teeth in it. All we're really saying is that we're going to cooperate between the city and the county to try to get this jail and this road put in from west into onto Pueblo Boulevard. And my feeling is that putting this kind of thing where you want 30 slots now, this cooperative agreement is not the right place to do that. I believe that has to be negotiated with the sheriff going forward. That's my opinion, but I'd like to hear your thing that negotiating for this additional space better done face to face with the sheriff and not under this cooperative agreement that's really focused on getting the jail built.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, I think anytime you bring up these issues, I think they're important to bring up. And if you can at least bring it to their attention, say, this is our need. I don't think that's a bad thing. I cooperated with Chief Keschner and with Commissioner Ortiz when they were trying to get a new jail. I participated in the neighborhood talks and talked about the importance of them. And I was very open with them, saying, I'm happy to do this because it's a need. And I think it's a need both for Pueblo, the city of Pueblo, and the county, and we should be working together to do it. But I did tell him, when you build the new jail, then we're going to need more space as we be able to that we have. And I don't think there's any of them that say, no, we don't want to do that because, they're all public safety. I'm sure Sheriff Taylor's told me that, it's just as important to him to deal with municipal and maybe any other. But at the time that he was taking them, he just didn't have this. So I'm hoping that the building is built, we can negotiate something, whether it be a cooperative agreement now or something later that we can negotiate that we're going to have more beds available.
Thank you.
Councilor Winter, I noticed that you unmuted. Oh, sorry, Councilor Winter, did you have any questions at all?
Not yet, thanks.
Okay, Councilor Maestri.
It's no secret that we called this session here today, Dennis. So I think that, it's time to take the opportunity, and we feel like we're getting feedback from county saying that they're ready to, work towards an IGA to get this done. So I would like to see us move forward. And, we can get with the sheriff and Commissioner Ortiz and get that agreed upon, because it would probably be a separate IGA anyways. It wouldn't be in relation to that one. And I feel like maybe they're ready to draft that. They know that that's a concern of ours and it's a need. And it's time that we move forward. There were all kinds of situations, like you said, it's nobody's fault. The overcrowdedness, the condition of the jail, all things came into play that were out of everyone's hands. We're just trying to do the best that we could do with what we had. But we have a new jail. And, there's a large tax base from the city that's going to contribute towards that jail. And we need to get this covered. And so I'm sure that we all are able to read that IGA that they're going to present to us so that we can move forward and make sure that we're covered in it. So, all right. Well, thank you for coming. And it'll be nice to see our community work together on this and get it done.
Councilor Martinez Ortega.
Yes, thanks, Judge. Thanks, Chief, for the presentation. Are we going to have access to this slideshow that you showed us? Have access to that information beyond this? Oh, okay. I didn't get it in my agenda.
I just got the PowerPoint presentation to Daryl today.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it's given to you.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. So I'll email it to Laura and she can.
Yeah, with the Colorado State Legislature determining that it's not appropriate to, for less serious offenses for them to go to jail, why are we sending any municipal offenses to jail other than failure to appear?
So, well, there's a couple of different things. Typically, people don't go to jail unless they're habitual offenders. They're not sentenced to jail unless they're habitual offenders, or they have some contempt charges for failing to appear. I mean, those are the two main reasons. As far as the lower level offenses, the Colorado legislature passed a bill a couple of years ago, last year, that said that on those lower level offenses, which would be considered petty offenses at the state level, you cannot hold anyone in jail for any reason, regardless of the number of times that they failed to appear. Now, on those offenses, generally, those are the people that receive failures to appear. Now, you can hold them until they are advised, so you can hold them up to 48 hours, but then you have to advise them that they'd be entitled to a PR bond after that, and that they are going to be released. So, so we do that. Now, if they had another case that they were sentenced on and they had violations of probation, then you can hold them on those charges. Or if they had a more serious charge, like battery, theft over $50, things like that, you can set bond and you can hold them in bond for those. So those are all things that are always considerations when we go in there. And there is a debate and whether or not a contempt charge is a separate charge. So it is no longer a lower level offense at that point. It's no longer a loitering. Now it's a contempt charge, which does carry the possibility of jail. And the legislature is looking at some bills this year, I believe, that would talk about the parameters for when municipal courts can hold them. Because what we have, again, it's not good for the defendants, not good for the community when you can't hold them and get them resources or something to resolve the case. And so they're looking at can only hold them if they've had four failures to appear or something along those lines. So the legislature's still looking at the issue, and I'm sure those things are.
Do you hold them in contempt for failure to appear as a separate charge, or do you hold? So you do. So you are jailing folks for failure to appear
on a contempt charge.
So aside from the legislature saying that that's not appropriate,
so
happening here in Pueblo,
they can be held on a separate charge of contempt.
I understand that.
Yeah. So there are circumstances, I can tell you, that we're very liberal with it. So no one's going to get held unless they have 4 or 5 contempts. And that means if they have 4 or 5 contempts, they have failed to appear, made promises to appear, and failed to appear for court at least 5 or 6 times.
Okay. So. Thanks for that explanation, Judge. During COVID, what was your experience of folks failing to appear to the court dates? Was it any more or any less? Because I think what we found was that folks go to court, aside from the folks who just won't, they just won't go to court. Folks go to court whether you hold them or not, correct?
Well, I can tell you we've done a couple of things to prove people going to court. So I don't know that there was a huge difference during COVID, the amount of people that.
From what I hear, it is significant that people did go.
Well, people did show up to court, and we've done a couple of different things. We have a program that sends out text messages to remind them that they have court dates, or that they have a payment expire, or that they have warrants. So if we've issued a warrant they'll get a text message, and we do have a lot of people that come in voluntarily on that when they receive a text message, and we clear the warrant and we resolve the case. In some cases, I have my marshal call or a probation call if we had someone that was supposed to be there for haven't shown up, but they've been doing what they're supposed to do. I'll have them call and respond and say, back. No warrant. So I mean, what I'll tell defendants all the time is that, you know, as long as you're showing up at court and you're communicating with us, we're going to work with you. But if you absolutely push off a court and you're lying about it, then you're tying my hands because I've got to do something.
Hey, Counselor Winter, we're getting a lot of feedback, I think, in the room. Would you mind muting until you have a specific question or something like that? Just because we're getting a lot of feedback.
Can you repeat that? My internet's just a little wacky.
Sure. We're just getting a lot of feedback in the room from the Zoom and not being on mute. So if you could just mute until you have a specific question or anything like that, just so we can minimize the feedback. Thank you.
That's fine. Did you have any other questions?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay.
Could you explain the 4-hour hold? I know that's kind of, where do they go now for 4-hour hold since the jail doesn't take them?
That's something that we did as patrol officers. We would take somebody to the jail. They would hold them for up to 4 hours. Now they don't go anywhere.
They don't go
We
anywhere.
don't have any place to take them.
Mm-hmm. I know that's kind of is there a liability on the county jail for if anything happens to those inmates, or is it like an inconvenience? I mean, is it a lot of paperwork to process? I know that there's some grief there with 4-hour holds. What is the beef?
You know, I don't want to speak for the sheriff's office. I obviously every inmate that a jail takes in increases liability, just like every contact that a law enforcement officer makes increases our liability. So, I mean, there is certainly an aspect of that. How much that drove that decision, I couldn't tell you. As far as the paperwork, it's no more paperwork than on a normal arrest, no less paperwork than on a normal arrest. Whether doing it for 4 hours is an inconvenience, I don't think so. And I don't think that was the issue. But I would be speaking out of turn because I don't understand what was going on internally at the sheriff's office when that decision was made.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Flores.
Mr. Kagosik, I wanted to ask you a question about the agreement the county's asked us to sign. It's a cooperative agreement, so that if we were to put an amendment within that and asking for 30 additional beds, is that the appropriate kind of document in a cooperative agreement, or would it be worded on the basis that we would work toward that amount?
Well, that would be unusual because of the subject matter of this cooperative agreement. What I'd recommend is that we have a separate agreement that would be approved dealing with the jail issues. And then we would agree to that, have the county sign it. And then after that is signed, we can go back to the cooperative agreement. It can be done. But I'd recommend a separate agreement. The issue of having an agreement between the city of Pueblo and the county sheriff regarding detention has been very problematic, both from the county's perspective and obviously from ours. We sit down and negotiate with them, and they don't like firm numbers. So that's where the breakdown occurs.
Can they be done in concert? In other words, can we do those at the same time?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I mean, that to me is the only way to do it. That would give them an incentive to first sign an agreement regarding municipal offenders and 30 beds or whatever. And after that is approved, we could sign the cooperation agreement with them dealing with the jail. But you're correct. This IGA is really not an IGA. It's an agreement to cooperate, to discuss later. Commitments are made, but it's not a binding IGA. They want to really deal with, is the city willing to give up its 15 mills on this new property for purposes of paying the county's bonds? And we can say no. The school district can say no. The Water Conservancy District, all the entities that have mill levy authority can say, no, we're not going to pledge, sorry. So that, I think, is the purpose of this agreement, is to get a reading on, will the city consider pledging its property tax mill levy? I think it's 15.63 mills, and allow that to be considered tax increment for purposes of paying their COPs. I don't know if that answers your question, but I
think it does.
I would prefer two agreements. Can we put this in the IGA? Oh, absolutely. That could be a separate section of the IGA.
The problem with putting it in the IGA, it seems to me, is that there are multiple parties to that IGA. This issue is between the city and the county in terms of how many jail cells. The other parties to the IGA, I think, are Pueblo West, the Board of Waterworks, Urban Renewal, all those people who don't have any interest in this particular issue. So I think the better practice would be to have a separate agreement with the county on that.
And do we know how many additional space, I guess, in the new jail is versus the old jail?
I think it's going to be less.
It's going to be less.
I think it's going to be less.
I think they were building, I thought, well, okay. So when I talked to Commissioner Ortiz and they began discussions about the jail, the plan was to have a jail to house 800 inmates or thereabouts. It's my recollection. I could be wrong, but that's my recollection. But they agreed to go with a smaller number, and then with the hopes that eventually future with the new place where they're building it, they could then add on. So I do believe that.
It's a modular design, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That the number of beds, I'm not sure it's going to be less, but I don't think it's any more than what they have currently.
It also seemed to me like there was the ability to increase, if it was and I'm just throwing numbers out, if it was designed for 300, that they could increase that to 600 without adding space. That's my understanding.
Counselor Wenner, I want to revisit you just in case you had any questions or comments.
I do. So your 15 mills is what, $1,000 per home value? So how much money are we talking? Mr. Kragosic.
I do not have that number. It would depend on the value of taxable real property in this TIF district. And the TIF district would start at Purcell, work its way to Pueblo Boulevard. Jail itself is not taxable. So I don't know what their projections are.
It depends on the new development that goes in. There's a certain base period. The TIF is that extra money, that extra tax increment over.
Right. So you don't have an impact statement on this?
No, they have not gone that far in the process.
So they're asking us to give up money without an impact statement.
Correct.
That's not appropriate. You might want to read that language. So we shouldn't sign anything without an impact statement. No government entity should without an impact statement. And they should have that already before even asking us.
Well, this agreement isn't to that point yet. As Dan said, this is not really a binding agreement. It's sort of hey, can we all cooperate and work towards this end kind of thing? And this expresses the city's willingness to do that. If an urban renewal district is going to be formed, and if tax increment financing is going to be a part of that, there will be an agreement that will set that forth with specificity that will have that information in it. But this is not that. But that will have to come later if that's what transpires. There'll have to be formal agreements subsequently, but it doesn't need to be in this.
This whole agreement is about TIF. This whole thing is.
This is not really an agreement at all. I mean, it's not binding on anybody. It just says we agree to work towards this end. I mean, there really is no harm in signing this, entering into this agreement. The county's asked us to do it. The other entities are doing it. I think Urban Renewal has done it. I think the Board of Waterworks has done it. You know, and as I say, when it gets down to that point, in terms of the tax financing in the Urban Renewal District, you guys are the ones that will decide whether there's an Urban Renewal District, how big it is, whether or not tax increment financing will be a part of that. Only the city council will decide that, nobody else. So you have plenty of control left over this process.
Okay.
Councilor Maestri. Okay. Judge, I know that you have 10 beds currently in the county jail. How many people usually use those per, is it 100%? They're all filled all the time?
I would say, we average about there's other people that are there that have municipal offenses too, but they're generally held on state charges. And so their municipal offense is not holding them. But I still see them on the jail advisements, and we still bring them over for pretrial while they're in custody so that we can get the cases resolved, but they're not being held primarily on our cases. But generally speaking, about 8 of those beds are full. I can tell you currently, the jail is working with us, and we have 14, I believe, in custody. And some of that was because right now, some of the defendants, they can, if they're arrested, they can refuse to show up for municipal court. So they just refuse to come down to advisements, and then they stay in there until they come down, or we transport them over for a pretrial. Sometimes they have other court dates like district court, or they're quarantined because of COVID, or they have illnesses, and so we can't see them. And so because of the snowstorm and some other things that have kind of happened, we are actually have people in there that are waiting for pretrials. And we're planning a special day. We have pretrials on Wednesdays, and we're going to try and do a special Thursday to get those people taken care of so that we can get them over here for pretrials and get back under our 10 beds.
Okay, Councilor Maestri.
So those are for pre-trial, but what we're trying to achieve here is beds for sentenced inmates also.
That's for both.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the generally 8 in custody being held on municipal only are sentenced and pre-sentenced.
How many are at the other jails?
So right now, I believe we have 4 or 5 sentenced defendants that are at Los Animas. So on top of that, so maybe total 13. Well, right now we have 14 in the Pueblo County. So you're looking at about 20. You know,
on an average.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're looking to bring I'm sorry, to bring them directly into jail. What was it? What were we calling
So
them?
the direct arrest.
The direct arrests. You're
Now-
looking for beds for those.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, again, those beds, typically those beds may not be long-term. So those would be people that are directly arrested and then advised within the 48 hours.
Mhm.
And so they could be released. So they may have only be held two days. So then those beds would fluctuate again.
And it's important to have the IGA in place because there are terms to you housing, your sentencing and housing your inmates that would be followed because you have a contract. Whereas it's kind of just open book right now for the jail to maybe reduce some of your sentencing by early release and things like that. Is that?
Well, there's a couple of different things that come into place with sentencing. So under the statutes, defendants are entitled to good time whenever they're sentenced. And that's changing here shortly too, because that was changed in the last legislative session. But it's an easy number. So I'll use the current numbers. They get 2 days of good time for every 30 days they're sentenced. And then in addition to that, they can get good time for participating in substance abuse programs or acting as a trustee or other things that the sheriff would award good time for. So the sheriff is very liberal with his good time. So typically right now on our sentences in the Pueblo County Jail, they serve about half their sentence, half to 3/4 of their sentence. So if someone's sentenced to 90 days, they'll do 45. If I sentence someone to 90 days in Los Animas, they're going to do 90 days less the 6 days for good time because they don't get those same considerations. Now, again, that we're working out with the jail because in the past, I believe in consistent sentences. I don't like giving someone 90 days if they're going to be housed in Pueblo County and 180 or vice versa, 180 if they're going to be housed in Pueblo County because I know they'll serve 90 and then give the other person 90 because I know they're going to be housed in Los Animas. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And I believe in truth in sentencing. So if I sentence someone to 90 days, I think they ought to be doing 90 days because that's what the sentence warrants or close to it. Those are things that we've worked with in the past. We've had different agreements and of course, Sheriff's Department's gone through changes in staff and things like that. So we work through those things internally. But that is a consideration. I mean, that's just different between counties.
And would the IGA clarify all of those? Or is that still going to be able to take place?
I'm not sure that we could do that in the IGA. And the only reason I'm hesitant for that is because Colorado statutes allow sheriffs to manage their jail population. And so they have the ability to give good time and to release inmates for certain reasons to reduce overcrowding and things like that. So I'm not sure that, I suppose the county could agree to something in an IGA, but I would be surprised if that would be addressed in that. Usually we just sort of do that as a cooperative agreement between the court and the jail, and I've issued directives in the past. And so that's how we've tried to manage that.
Okay, and then Chief, is all of these tickets that the national headlines of under $2,000 get a ticket rather than be arrested, are those mostly municipal offenders?
Currently, and it actually ends in March, we can still use second-degree burglary. So essentially what happens is if a person is repeatedly, and I might be talking about two different things, so if I am, please stop me. But if a person is trespassed from a store, goes back in and commits another theft when they're trespassed, that fits the definition of second-degree burglary, which is currently a felony.
Okay.
And we can take them to county jail. In March, second-degree burglary becomes a misdemeanor, and misdemeanors are except certain misdemeanors and the occasional certain circumstance, they're not allowed to be booked into Pueblo County Jail.
Okay.
So what we would have to do is issue a citation. Now, what I'm not clear on, and the judge and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, is whether municipal statute has been changed to allow us to charge theft from merchant up to $2,000. In that case, we would be able to issue them a citation. The way I understand it currently works is $1,000 is the threshold for municipal theft. So anybody that committed a theft between $1,000 and $2,000 walks away with nothing. Now, on the back end, we write a warrant for their arrest. We send it through the DA's office, and then the DA will issue that warrant. And later on, we'll be able to go arrest them on that warrant. So it's not like nothing ever happens to them.
Mhm.
But what doesn't happen is any immediate consequence, whether that's even getting a piece of paper.
Mhm. Yeah, because a lot of the business owners in my district are just, I mean, they're suffering really bad. They're walking in, they're grabbing merchandise and they're leaving, and then they're coming back the next day and they're doing the same thing.
Well, that's where I think
Yeah.
our ability, if we have somebody who's a habitual offender, to take them to county jail and book them in on that theft would be helpful.
Mhm.
You know, I think there's a lot of data that shows that some kind of ramification immediately prevents your actions. I don't think everybody that commits any crime in Pueblo has to go to jail.
Mhm.
But I think that there are certain individuals whose conduct won't change,
Mhm.
that going to jail and spending the night in jail, seeing the judge the next day or 48 hours and having to answer to the judge and get a bond and all these things, it has a deterrent effect.
Mhm.
You know, and I know there's some disagreement from some on whether that's true or not, but I've been in this job for 28 years.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience.
Yes.
So the last comment before we move on, Martinez Ortega.
Hi, Judge, I was curious, do you use diversion as at any point other than punitive? Do you only use punitive steps to make the community whole again? Do you use diversion at all? Do you use any program like that? Since the municipal court has a higher caseload or a lower caseload than the judicial district 10, right? Or whatever I'm trying to say. But do you understand what I'm saying? Do you use diversion at all instead of just jail?
Sure. So we always try diversion before we impose jail. I mean, I don't think I've ever imposed jail on a first offense. It's always diversion first. And so, you know, we have our community service program, which they're allowed to work off their fines and occasionally costs as well. I give community service credit for participating in drug, alcohol, or mental health treatment. So they can participate in treatment options, and it takes care of their fines and costs. We provide them with resources. I have a probation department that works really hard to try and pair up those resources that really try to identify the issues. So I've given credit against fines for people getting their license, for getting their IDs, for getting their driver's license, for applying for work. For going to school. So, I mean, there's all types of things that we try to do. My goal is to have people get the help they need so they're not reoffending in the future. I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good if they're going to have the same problems and all we're doing is throwing them in jail without any solutions. One of my biggest frustrations is that we don't have a lot of resources in Pueblo. So one of our inpatient treatment programs closed, Health Solution closed their doors this past year. So we really only have Crossroads in town. Their detox center is usually full. So getting people in is tough. I have defendants that I have worked with over the years. And so we have them in jail, and I want to send them directly to jail to a rehabilitation program, which is part of a plea agreement, maybe that they've negotiated with their attorney and with the city attorney. But the treatment facility won't take them directly from jail. They have to be out and sober for 30 days before they'll take them, at least on municipal court. And in my experience, if you're going to release someone from jail and you're going to put them back into the exact same situation they came out of, then you're setting them up to fail. So asking them to remain sober for 30 days is just unrealistic. And I don't have better resources. And municipal court, you know, the district building has different resources than I do. And so municipal court is really tied. We rely a lot upon volunteer compliance. And so, ultimately it may come down to serving time. Just because we just don't have those resources available, and I would love to have them. The other program, and I'll just highlight this because we're trying to put it together, is a restorative justice program. Doesn't have much to do with the jail, but I'm going to plug it anyway. In my court, I see a lot of neighborhood disputes between neighbors, things like that. And so a restorative justice program we're trying to put together for kids and adults so that they could come, and they don't even have to be defendants with municipal court, but the goal would be able to facilitate them getting together with a third party to help mediate those disputes, so that they could resolve them and come up with their own solutions so that we don't have to see them. The officers don't have to keep getting called out to their homes. So I'm working with my probation department right now, trying to put that together. Hopefully I'll be bringing something to you guys this summer, because I'm pretty excited about it. And I think it would be a fantastic thing for Pueblo to have. So anyway.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of restorative justice. So let me know if you need any help from community members to help devise that program.
Thanks. Judge, we'll see you in the summer.
Wait, Councilor Martinez, I'm sorry, but I have to just jump in here. Work session is where we work everything out. So I know there's some people that want to get home, but this is the meat of everything that we do before the council meeting. So I just respectfully disagree with you, Mayor, and also with you, Mr. Krugosic. This whole thing is TIF. And Councilor Maestri is absolutely correct that this agreement needs to go in this particular language, because it states right here that they're going to retain financing early in 2022 based on TIF. So if we agree to this, this is saying that this will be a TIF district. This takes money from the city of Pueblo. So this is our teeth. This agreement needs to go, or this request needs to go with this IGA, because this is everything. This is everything. And it can definitely be put in there. You said it could be put in there last time, but it says the county has conferred with CURA concerning the creation of an urban renewal district with associated tax increment financing, which is TIF. The district would encompass the entire roadway corridor and expand on the west and in Pueblo West, and on the east and to the city to include existing and new commercial development, et cetera, et cetera. It has retained financial consultants and bond counsel and plans to issue tax increment bonds and or certificates and participation early in 2022. This is the teeth to our agreement. It needs to go in here. A mill levy is what? And I know you know this, Mr. Krugosic, but it's 1 mil per $1. It's $1 in taxes per 1,000. So it's counting everything now and everything in the future, Mr. Mayor. This is our agreement right here.
Hey, Council.
We don't agree. If we don't agree, unless we have 30 beds, they don't get TIF.
This, whether they get TIF or not, will be determined by the city council later. Signing this agreement does not give them TIF. An urban renewal district has not been created. This indicates they plan to create an urban.
Right, we're agreeing to it. We're agreeing that they create it. They're getting financing early 2022.
You are the ones that decide whether that's going to happen in the future or not, whatever this agreement says. Only you.
I highly recommend the council insist that paragraph is in on this particular agreement. Otherwise, it's going to be just like your Pueblo West agreement, Nick.
Mayor and Mr. Krugosic, is there a way just to write something in there, an intent that the city reserves the right to condition any agreement on the approval of an IGA with the jail? Something that goes along with the tenure of the cooperative agreement? Or as Mr. Krugosic said, you can always negotiate the IGA first before you sign the cooperative agreement, which is always an option. But if that isn't, or then I don't know, Mr. Krugosic, is it, I mean, it's your contract, but I was just thinking if we're talking about just intent, that might be.
I am, Judge, I'm going to take a look at the last agreement we have with the county sheriff. That's what we want to update. Well, that's a good place to start. And respectfully submitted, Councilor Winter, the TIF district has to be created. The mill levies have to be agreed to by all taxing entities. This agreement, if we're going to look at that, it at a later date, that we are not pledging anything, but it's up to city council to form the district.
The first paragraph says right here that, as you mentioned, it's all the taxing entities for TIF. That's your very first paragraph.
Well, I think this is an agreement to discuss later. I don't think it's.
This is basically saying, go ahead, get your bond financing, go ahead and start your financing, your participation early in 2022, because we're going to agree. That's what it's saying.
While we continue to talk about the IGA, I just want to be careful of your time, Judge and Chief. So if you would like to go, you are fully dismissed. Otherwise, we'll keep talking about the IGA here. Councilor Flores.
Let me rephrase what you said previously. You said that by Colorado statute, a sheriff has the sole responsibility to determine the occupancy of his jail and who comes into what agreements are made, I guess. So we're really talking about maybe something that we don't have a power to override by some guarantee. And I know that we've had an agreement before, but did I not hear you right?
So the sheriff has the responsibility to manage the jail population.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there's parameters in there for doing that. Obviously, I think any contract that you enter, and Mr. Kogosic can jump in too, any contract that you enter can put certain parameters on that. Obviously, like COVID would be an exception to that. And the sheriff would have the ability, I think, even under the contract to say, because of COVID, this is what's going to happen in the jail. And if I recall correctly, I was the one that looked at the 1983 agreement. And I believe there were provisions in there that said that under certain conditions, he or she retained the right to manage the jail population for safety. And there's some other considerations, some other language in there. But generally speaking, I mean, any contract you have is going to set down the agreement between the parties, right? So, I mean, that's going to be something that you're going to want them to be accountable for. And if there's an exception to that, they're going to have to be able to explain it. I think the contract is important, but as Mr. Kogosic said, and historically, they have been reluctant to tie it down to specific terms. The other thing too is that one of the issues that came up with the 1983 contract is that it was signed by the county and not by the sheriff himself. And so one of my questions for Mr. Kogosic would be, is if you're going to enter into an IGA, if the county signs it, is it going to bind the sheriff? And if you have Sheriff Taylor, for instance, sign it now, is that going to bind the future sheriff? Because that may become an issue.
Well, the agreement would be with the sheriff as an office of Pueblo County government. So the sheriff will be bound. I'm also going to recommend that the county sign giving their consent to the agreement. So, well, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
I remember you working on this agreement years ago when you were an assistant city attorney.
Yeah. So
you're very familiar with it, needs to be updated. But that, I think, is what we want, not an agreement later to agree, although that has some benefit. But what we want is, here's our new agreement with the Pueblo County Sheriff.
Might I suggest as a way forward that we put this agreement back on the agenda for council, and we'll put it on just like it was done before. When it gets there, if there's interest, if the council wants to make a motion to amend the agreement to include a paragraph that says or decide.
With all due respect, Mayor, that's what work session is for. And if you have an agreement that your 15 mills is part of your 30 beds, if we're not getting 30 beds, you don't get your 15 mil, period.
Well,
you're locked in.
I want to add something here, all right? I think all of us agree that we need a new jail, okay? And the only thing the county's asked us for is, it's almost like a letter of recommendation, okay? That everybody in Pueblo is agreeing that we need a jail, we need to move forward together in concert. And that image is important for them to get the thing financed and get everybody on board as far as our departments of planning, including urban renewal. And by the way, whatever you generate in TIF by urban renewal is not going to pay for this jail. It's much more. I mean, this is a huge, I don't know, what is it, 60, 80 million? I don't know. It's a big, 110. Okay. It's a big number. TIF is going to be a very small part of that, especially in an area that's a lot of vacant weeds out there. But do we want to compromise our ability to get together with the county to get this jail built and get that road extension? I don't think we do. I want to see that at our next city council meeting so we can deal with that. That it is so important that we all look like we're rowing the boat in the right direction. I think it's important for us to get the other 30 beds, and I think that's got to be done separately with the sheriff. And I'm willing to work on that, but we cannot compromise. Or I mean, if we refuse to sign the agreement, okay, how does that look?
We're not refusing to sign it. We're just adding a paragraph. That's all we're doing. If you're taking 15 mills, we want 30 beds, period. That way you're not getting political with sheriffs now or sheriffs in the future.
You're treating this as a contract, and it's really just a cooperative agreement. It's a completely different
contract. They're taking money. There should be an impact statement with this to show you exactly how much. It'll total millions of dollars. It's the law.
I can't.
The statute states there should be an impact statement attached to this, which we don't have. Otherwise, we'd have the dollar figure. But this is TIF. What you're looking at is you're agreeing to TIF now. What you're saying is, yeah, we're going to vote for this in the future. So go ahead and get your bonds. That's what we're saying in this agreement.
I can't imagine the county giving up the whole deal over 30 beds. It's time that we put this issue to rest. This is, we're moving forward. We're investing in this project. And there's no reason why we can't have an agreement. It could be a separate agreement. It could be attached to this agreement, but we just need to move forward. And I don't think we're looking bad, especially amongst our constituents who, want us to do what's best, have a piece of the pie and have some say in it. We contribute a lot of our tax dollars to the creation of this new jail, this new project. So to sit there and wait for somebody to say, hey, I want to give you a contract for 30 beds. I mean, that's, we risk, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. Let's just do the contract. It's been on the table for discussion. The county is expecting it. Let's just continue to move forward and get it done as quickly as possible.
I think that the two ideas right now on the table, if I'm hearing everyone correctly, is one, with the IGA that the county has currently sent us, can we include a paragraph or a statement, similar to what Judge made earlier in that original IGA? That's one option. Two, can we submit a whole separate IGA specific to the county and or the sheriff per Judge's suggestion earlier? So I think those are the two ideas right now on the table. Is that what I'm hearing from everyone?
Councilor Martinez, I would like to ask Judge Sykes what she's most comfortable with, what she's more confident with. The agreement on this TIF or a separate IGA. Because the agreement on this TIF, this is a TIF agreement. This is saying we're going to vote for TIF.
Well, I'm not sure that it's really up to me what I'm more comfortable with. I do like Mr. Kogosik's suggestion that you enter into a separate IGA. I think it's cleaner. And I think because you are going to have multiple parties signing this agreement about TIF. So I think it's cleaner if we do it by a separate agreement. And if the law department wants to negotiate that in conjunction with the cooperative agreement, I think that makes sense because you're still leveraging the cooperative agreement for this separate agreement. And if that's what you want to do, I think that makes sense. My main goal is that I agree with Councilman Flores. We need a new jail. And I want to see us all work together to accomplish that. And in any way, I don't necessarily want it to be confrontational or anything like that with the jail, because I want to maintain that good working relationship. Hopefully they're at a point where they're willing to enter into an agreement. And mind you, that agreement, I don't know how long it's going to take to build the jail, but we're looking at that agreement's probably not going to go into effect till the jail is built. And that's going to be what, what is it? 2038? All right. So I mean, if that's what we're looking at, I guess we don't want to wait till the new jail because that really, I didn't think it was going to take that long to get built. But that's what I like, is I think that's cleaner.
Dan.
It would be my pleasure to put a paragraph in this IGA that the sheriff will use best efforts to provide the city with 30 beds for municipal only offenders. I don't know if that's really all that he can do. I mean, it depends on what's going to happen. Is another variant of COVID going to come back? Is the state legislature going to make the county jail the place for confining state defendants? I mean, they've already started that. No level 5 or level 6 felonies are going to the state prison. They're all being dropped off on the county. So a best efforts paragraph, I'm happy to draft and put in the agreement. I think that's all we can ask for.
And Dan, can you clarify if that's separate from an IGA? You're just going to put the paragraph in?
We have been working on trying to update this 1983 agreement for at least 20 years. And I don't think we can get that done before this comes up, this IGA comes up for approval. So I'm happy to stick in a best efforts commitment, and I'll run it by the judge, of course. I'll be happy to send it to, I'll send it separately, obviously, to the mayor and the chief of staff for their input. I will send it separately to every council member. so I can get their input. I can't send it in mass because of the open meetings law, but I'm delighted to do that in time for the February 14th meeting. It's up for second reading on February 14th.
Councilman Atencio.
Two things. The cooperative agreement is separate from the IGA. Why are we trying to impose a 30-bed limit when we average 8?
Because.
Huh? We're the city council and we're gonna shove it down your throat, county commissioners, and that's because that's what we want. We're averaging 8. We're gonna shove it down their throat. We won't agree, we won't cooperate with you unless you give us 30 beds. Let's do the cooperative agreement when the particulars come back from the county and the sheriff, and we find out what the particulars are. We can vote on those, whether we're going to do a urban renewal project area, whether we're going to do the TIF, whether we're going to do the 15 mills. That's another question when the IGA comes out. Let's do the cooperative agreement.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I can say no. I can agree to a cooperative agreement now and then say no to the particulars when the IGA comes out.
Well, Councilor Winter is correct that at work sessions, the staff receives direction. And that's what we need.
Well, right now we're asking for direction as to whether we're going to go with the cooperative agreement.
Yes.
The IGA is another question altogether because all I've gotten is supposition from everybody as to what is going to be in the IGA. I haven't seen the IGA. I want to see it in black and white before I make a decision on that.
Well, the direction that we need, Councilor Atencio, is what do you want us to do with this cooperative agreement to work toward reaching mill levies and the size of the district? You know, most of this urban renewal district is going to be in the county.
Well, then let's cooperate and then we can disagree later.
So we need direction. Is the direction that we insert a paragraph or that we just approve the IGA as presented? That's the issue that we need direction on because it's coming up for second reading next Monday.
So in doing all of this, we have to do our homework. So we talk to the different entities involved, okay? We know that the county knows that this is coming. They have an expectation and that they're willing to work with us. So before we start in, and you just said here recently that the agreement that you want to sign, the original agreement, we can add a paragraph there, but you just said it had no teeth. So why don't we reach out across the aisle to the commissioner and the sheriff and see what they're willing to negotiate and put that, let's ask them.
Councilor Maestri, like you said, the county commissioners are expecting this to be inserted. And they're expecting a certain amount of beds. That's what they're expecting.
They're right.
This does have teeth.
It
should not be aspirational at all.
I'm just telling you what they're telling us. Okay, right over here, our legal counsel and our mayor is telling us it doesn't have teeth.
It doesn't, right. But we don't have to, this statement does not have to be aspirational.
They're willing to write a separate IGA. And I don't know why we're just not trying to put this to rest, move forward, and go from there. If they're willing to cooperate.
Counselor, if you've been talking with them, why don't you get that IGA from them? You apparently have been negotiating with them.
I haven't been negotiating anything. I've been asking questions.
Well, you said that they're expecting this and
Well, they're expecting us to have a discussion here tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
I thought you said they were looking for an IGA from us.
No, and they're expecting that they're going to have to make some sort of decision in regards to the beds that are needed by municipal. And it's not just 8. We're using 8, but we're also in other counties housing our prisoners. It's not just the 8. And we're looking to bring prisoners, bring offenses in off the street, which we don't have that opportunity to now. But with 30 beds, we can. So this way, we're just not ticketing people and they're not showing up to court. And I think that we've come a really long way tonight, because I don't know about very many of my council members that were even familiar with it. What was going on here between the city and the county. And when we're looking at working together with the county, we're giving them quite a bit from us, the city. We need to see something that's going to benefit us. And if we haven't been able to do it for how many years now? And we're this close now. Let's get in there and just get it done. I don't think that they're not going to not build their project or move forward with their project over 30 beds. I don't think. And by the way, it's 675 beds that they've got currently planned, and they're working towards in the low 700s by the time this is complete. And they're able to add wings, pods. The jail is designed to add, further beds. So there's going to be plenty of beds. 30 beds isn't a whole lot of beds.
Okay, so to get back to Mr. Kogosik's question, what is the direction that this council would like to provide Mr. Kogosik moving forward?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? So if we want to talk to the county about an IGA, if the council wants to direct, I'm happy to work with Mr. Kogosik, reach out to the county and see where they are. I mean, if they're gonna take a position, what position they would take. I don't think that phone call or that conversation is a bad one just to have, just to reach out, say, what are you looking at? What can we talk about? So I think that's an important start. And then we'll have a better idea as to, what their intentions are and what they're expecting and what they're willing to do. But I think that's the start, is just to open that conversation. And I'm happy to participate in that if you want me to.
Councilman Flores, Dan first.
Thank you. We have been trying to update the IGA with the county regarding municipal offenders for 39 years. It is not going to get resolved by next Monday. We can put in a best efforts clause. And admittedly, there's a big loophole there. It doesn't have teeth because of state law. State law trumps everything we do. The sheriff can release offenders as he sees fit. That's state law. We can't contract our way around that. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Councilman Flores.
Yeah, one of the things, I don't have any problem with you putting in this cooperative agreement a paragraph that indicates that we are, we'll get together with the county and try to work out an IGA at some point. But I want to see the second reading at our next meeting. I want to vote on that. I don't want to stall that anymore. We haven't even talked about the fact that probably 80% of the employees at that jail live in the city. They're our constituents too. And it's also a very unsafe place from a risk management standpoint. That is probably one of the worst buildings in the city. And I wouldn't want my family to be working in that jail just because of the ventilation and the sewer system in that place. That's another issue that we need to be considering. And I don't want to slow this process down anymore. So my vote, I don't mind putting a paragraph in there in the cooperative agreement. But I want this this cooperative agreement to be at our next meeting so we can vote on it at second reading.
Do we not have a second agreement coming into play after this one? There's also another agreement that's going to follow this agreement that has actually more teeth in it. Am I correct?
Well, not as far as state law is concerned.
No, I'm not talking about state law. I'm talking about in consideration with this project here alone, is there another IGA coming into effect?
They're going to be probably 3 or 4 to
Okay,
come down.
well, why
the
don't we
road.
put a timeline on ourselves to get, because there's more that are going to have more substantial teeth in them. Why don't we put a timeline on ourselves so that we, before we continue on through this project, that we have what we need as a city? Okay, because I know you say it can't be created by Monday. So let's put a timeline on it, and this is what we're working towards, is before we sign off on any more agreements, that this gets handled as a priority. Because like you said, 38 years.
Yeah, there
I
are.
think 38 years has been about a lot of egos or something involved, because that's ridiculous to even have that long before we've updated something like that. That's a need. It's a need for public safety reasons.
Well, I'm happy to do that.
Great. So we'd like to make it a priority.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then, Mr. Kagosic, is we are okay with adding just a paragraph and we are voting on it on Monday during the regular meeting. Is that what I'm hearing from everyone?
With a timeline that it must be completed by a date certain, is what I hear Councilor Maestri say. Now,
Yeah.
what date would you like me to insert?
Well, I think that before we have, as these agreements in regards to this project progress, I think we need to have something agreed upon before maybe the second IGA that they're going to put in front of us.
The next step, to authorize urban renewal to do a study, to do a blight study. That has to go through. Then they will come to us with a plan, a district, an urban renewal district that will be described by meets and bounds. This is going to be the urban renewal district in the city of Pueblo. And it's going to be relatively small because what they're going to annex is only the jail and maybe some surrounding lands. So our urban renewal district will be small. You have to make the decision, do you want to go just north of Pueblo Boulevard or do you want to go south of Pueblo Boulevard to get more TIF for urban renewal? Then once you agree to that, you approve the district, all the taxing entities, every single one has to sign an agreement regarding TIF. How much are we going to give? How much are we going to give all of our mill levy? That's your decision down the road.
How quickly can you get an agreement in place? There's a good start. How quickly can you get an agreement in place?
Which agreement you mean?
For the beds.
For the beds?
For the municipal beds. How quickly can you get that into place? Because really, it really depends on you, right? You're the one writing it
Well,
up.
it's by February 28th, I'll have it.
By February 28th?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now,
February 28th of this year.
yeah,
Okay.
in 3 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
in 3 weeks. Great.
Yeah, we'll have it in 3 weeks.
In terms of the draft of the agreement, you mean?
The draft of
Yeah,
the.
okay.
Yeah. Now, that's not saying the county's going to agree, but I'll have a draft. I'm delighted. I mean, that's usually more time than I have.
Mhm.
I can do it in 3 weeks.
Okay, well, it'll be great to look at it once you
Great.
got it up and going.
Okay, do we have consensus? We're okay with the paragraph, voting on it next meeting with, and then Mr. Nicholson will bring us something with his magic powers on the 28th after he does it.
Yes, I'm happy to send it to you in advance. I would certainly like the judge's review and comments. I have a lot of respect for her, but you'll have it by the 28th.
Okay, we're all okay with that? And we're gonna move forward because we're past time. Thank you, Mr. Kagosic. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Chief. And have a great night. The next thing on the agenda is a state of the city. Mayor.
Yeah, it's been 12 and a half hours since my first meeting today. So I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to commend to you the State of the City report that you all have a copy of here. Draw your attention to the cover, which is obviously a photograph of Neon Alley, and appropriately, Mona Lisa's got a mask on in honor of COVID. You'll see in here my remarks. We were going to deliver it live, but we decided not to. We canceled that meeting at the Chamber of Commerce. I just recorded the state of the city. We've lost more than 700 people this year, or since COVID began, to the disease. So you all know that a year ago, vaccines became available to anybody who wanted them, and a lot of the deaths since then have been unnecessary. I'm not going to belabor things, but 2020 was a year of economic survival for us when the pandemic hit. 2021, in contrast, was a year of economic growth and development. You look at our sales tax numbers, you've all gotten copies of those reports. When we did the state of the city, it looked like they're up 28%. It's actually 27.7% overall for the entire year last year that our sales tax is up. 669 new sales tax licenses were issued in the city of Pueblo last year. You know what's going on in the community in terms of development. We've got 3 national home builders building homes and developments here. Everaz is in the midst of their expansion project. That'll be at least a $500 million project. Vestas sold their wind tower manufacturing plant to CS Winds. And they have plans now to double the capacity of that plant, because they have plants around the world, and around the world, they deal with all of the wind manufacturers. Here, Vestas only built towers for Vestas. Now that it's owned by CS Winds, they'll be able to build towers for General Electric, Siemens, all those other wind tower or wind generating companies. So that's going to bode well for us. Let me just conclude by saying that this week, I think on the 3rd of February, we opened up the licensing portal so that electronically you now will be required basically in maybe a month or two, to renew your licenses electronically. This has been something we've been working on for at least 2 years at great expense to us. Pueblo West and the County of Pueblo they're a little ways behind us, but they're going to join this effort as well. This is going to be very important to the Pueblo Means Business Initiative, because it's going to allow everybody to interact through one portal. We're starting it now with regional building. It's gone live. It went live actually last year, but it's now publicly announced, and the public is encouraged to use it right now. And we think that in the next 18 months or so, Pueblo County and Pueblo West will be there with us. The State of the City report also contains a section on ARPA, so that you can see how much money we've got, what we've done with that. You know, the council's approved more than $7 million for 28 projects to date. And finally, we report there that ballot issue 2A passed overwhelmingly, 72% of the votes, which de-Bruces the city of Pueblo forever, so that we don't have to worry about Tabor excesses any longer. Those Tabor excesses for the foreseeable future will be used for road improvements. And the 2022 budget has $10 million committed to road improvements. So We're really proud of where the city's at this point, and I think we're certainly going in the right direction. We're finally recognizing some of the growth that the rest of Colorado has been experiencing for years. So happy to take any questions if you have any, but I don't want to belabor the point. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, it's 9:07 and I adjourn this meeting.